The stars had always been kind to the Valanthi Consortium. For 3,000 years, 7 different alien species had lived together in peace. They built great cities on 100 different worlds. They created beautiful art and amazing technology. They studied the universe and shared their knowledge with each other. War was something they only read about in old history books. Violence was a disease they had cured long ago. Ambassador Tellus Rin remembered the old days as she stood at the window of her office on Station Meridian. Her silver skin reflected the light of distant stars. Her large dark eyes watched the ships moving slowly outside. Once, those ships carried scientists and traders and families going on vacation. Now they carried refugees. Millions of them. Billions more were already dead. The Kethvaran swarm had come from the edge of the galaxy 6 months ago. No one had seen them coming. No one had known they existed. They appeared without warning, like a storm from nowhere. And they destroyed everything in their path. Tellus Rin closed her eyes and tried not to think about the reports she had read that morning. 12 more worlds had fallen. The Kethvaran did not conquer planets. They did not take prisoners. They consumed. Their massive ships landed on worlds and released billions of insect-like creatures that ate everything. Plants, animals, people, buildings, everything organic was food to them. Everything metal and stone was material for their ships. The door behind her opened with a soft sound. She did not turn around. "Ambassador," said a quiet voice. "The council is waiting." Tellus Rin nodded slowly. "I know, Varys. I know." Her assistant, a young Valanthi male with pale blue skin, walked to stand beside her. His eyes were red from crying. Most people on the station had been crying lately. "Is there any news?" he asked. "Any hope?" She turned to look at him. He was so young. He had never known anything but peace. None of them had. That was the problem. "Our fleet tried to stop them at the Corvin system," she said. Her voice was flat and tired. "We had 300 ships. The newest and best ships we had. And the battle lasted 4 minutes. We lost every ship. The swarm did not lose a single one." Varys made a small sound of pain. Tellus Rin put her hand on his shoulder. "Our weapons do not work," she continued. "Our shields cannot stop their attacks. Our ships are too slow, too weak, too few. We built our civilization on peace, Varys. We forgot how to fight. We forgot why anyone would need to fight." She paused. "Now we are paying the price." They stood in silence for a long moment. Outside the window, a refugee ship slowly docked with the station. It was damaged and smoking. Tellus Rin wondered how many people were inside. She wondered how many had died on the journey. "The council," Varys reminded her gently. She nodded and straightened her robes. They were the traditional silver and white of a Valanthi ambassador. She had worn them with pride for 50 years. Now they felt like a costume. A joke. What good was an ambassador when there was no one to negotiate with? The council chamber was full when she arrived. Representatives from all 7 species of the consortium sat around a massive circular table. Their faces showed the same emotions she felt. Fear, despair, confusion. They were like children who had woken up to find their house on fire. They did not know what to do. They did not know how to save themselves. High Chancellor Morvac of the Tithani sat at the head of the table. He was old, even by his species' long-lived standards. His gray skin was wrinkled and tired. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as Tellus Rin took her seat. "Thank you for coming, Ambassador," he said. His voice was weak. "I assume you have heard the news from Corvin." "I have." "Then you know our situation." He looked around the table. "We have perhaps 2 weeks before the swarm reaches this station. Our military is destroyed. Our colonies are falling one by one. We have sent messages to every corner of the galaxy asking for help." He paused. "No one has answered." A murmur went around the table. Tellus Rin understood. The other civilizations in the galaxy had their own problems. They were afraid of the swarm. They did not want to get involved in a war they could not win. Better to let the consortium die and hope the swarm was satisfied. "We have one option remaining," said Representative Kvalin of the Morvashi. He was a tall, thin creature with green skin and a long neck. His voice was nervous. "Evacuation. We load everyone onto ships and scatter into deep space. Perhaps some of us will survive." "For how long?" asked another representative. "The swarm is spreading across the galaxy. There is nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Arguments broke out around the table. Some wanted to evacuate. Some wanted to try negotiating with the swarm, even though every attempt at communication had been ignored. Some simply sat in silence, accepting their fate. Telesrin listened to them argue. She felt something building inside her. An idea she had been pushing away for days. An idea that was forbidden, illegal, possibly insane. She stood up. The room went quiet. "There is one other option," she said. Chancellor Morvac looked at her with tired eyes. "Please, Ambassador. We have considered everything. There is nothing. We have not considered everything." She took a deep breath. "We have not considered the quarantine zone." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Telesrin could hear her own heart beating. Finally, Chancellor Morvac spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." Representative Kvalin stood up so fast his chair fell over. "The quarantine zone is forbidden. It has been forbidden for 200 years. You know what lives there." "I know exactly what lives there," Telesrin replied calmly. "That is why I am suggesting it." The argument started again. Louder this time. Voices overlapped. People shouted. Telesrin waited. The quarantine zone. Every child in the galaxy knew the stories. Every species had their own version of the same tale. In a distant corner of the Orion Spur, there was a small yellow star with 8 planets. The third planet from that star was called Earth by its inhabitants. And those inhabitants were the most terrifying creatures in the known universe. Humans. Telesrin had studied them for decades. She knew the reports that were classified at the highest levels. She knew what humans were capable of. They came from a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there for more than a few hours. The gravity was crushing. The temperature changed wildly from burning hot to freezing cold. The atmosphere contained a corrosive gas called oxygen that would kill most species slowly and painfully. The planet was covered in natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, and the life forms that evolved there were equally deadly. Predators with sharp teeth and claws, poisonous plants and animals, diseases that spread like fire, and humans were the most dangerous of all. They were persistence hunters. Their bodies could keep moving long after other creatures collapsed from exhaustion. They could survive injuries that would kill any other species. They healed faster. They adapted faster. They thought faster. But the worst thing about humans was what they did to each other. The first contact between humans and the galactic community had happened 200 years ago. A Valanthi exploration ship had found Earth and observed it from orbit. What they saw horrified them. Humans were at war. They were always at war. They fought over land. They fought over resources. They fought over ideas. They fought over nothing at all. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. They had created biological agents that could kill millions. They had developed technologies of death that no other species had ever imagined, and they used these weapons on each other, on their own kind. The galactic community had been so frightened by what they saw that they made a decision. Humans must never be allowed to leave their solar system. A quarantine was established. A boundary was drawn. Ships patrolled the edge of human space, turning back any vessel that tried to leave. For 200 years, humanity had been locked away, hidden, forgotten by most of the galaxy. Now Telesrin was suggesting they ask those same humans for help. Chancellor Morvac finally raised his hands for silence. The room slowly quieted. "Ambassador," he said carefully, "I understand your desperation. We are all desperate. But what you are suggesting is madness. The humans are monsters. They are worse than the swarm. If we bring them into this conflict, we may defeat one enemy, only to create a worse one." "With respect, Chancellor," Telesrin replied, "the humans have been quiet for 200 years. They have not tried to break the quarantine. They have not attacked anyone. They have simply waited. Waited for what? I do not know. But I know this. The swarm is coming. In 2 weeks, everyone on this station will be dead. Everyone in the consortium will be dead. Our culture, our history, our children, everything we have built for 3,000 years will be gone." She looked around the table at the frightened faces. "The humans may be dangerous. They may be monsters. But they are our only chance. Would you rather die with dignity, or live with the help of creatures you fear?" The debate lasted for hours. There were angry speeches and tearful pleas. There were threats and accusations. But in the end, there was only one conclusion. They had no choice. Late that night, Telesrin stood alone in the communication center. The room was dark except for the glow of the transmission equipment. Her hands shook as she prepared the message. What would she say? How could she explain their situation? How could she ask for help from beings she had been taught to fear her entire life? In the end, she decided to be honest. "This is Ambassador Telesrin of the Valanthi Consortium," she said into the recording device. "I am sending this message to the inhabitants of the Sol system, to the humans of Earth." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "For 200 years, your species has been quarantined, isolated, feared. We looked at your history and saw violence. We looked at your nature and saw predators. We decided you were too dangerous to be allowed into the galaxy." Her voice cracked slightly. "Now we face an enemy we cannot defeat. The Kethvaran swarm is destroying our worlds, killing our people, consuming everything we have built. Our weapons do not work against them. Our ships cannot stop them. We are going to die." She wiped tears from her eyes. "I am not proud to ask for your help. I am not proud to admit that we were wrong about you. Perhaps we were not wrong. Perhaps you are exactly what we feared. But we have no other choice." She straightened and looked directly at the recording device. "If there is any compassion in your species, any mercy, any desire to help those who cannot help themselves, please respond. We do not have much time. The swarm will be here in 2 weeks." She reached for the controls to end the recording, then stopped. "I know we do not deserve your help. We locked you away. We treated you like animals. But we are dying, and you are our only hope." She ended the recording and sent it. The signal would take several days to reach Earth, several more days for a response to return. If there was a response, she turned off the equipment and walked to the window. The stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet around an ordinary star, her message was racing through space, racing toward creatures who had every reason to ignore it, every reason to hate the species that had imprisoned them. Would they answer? Would they come? Or would they simply laugh and watch the galaxy burn? Telesrin did not know. All she could do was wait and hope. Hope that she had not just made the worst mistake of her life. Hope that the monsters of Earth were not as terrible as the story said. Hope that the Deathworlders would rise from their shadows. Far across the galaxy, in the cold dark spaces between stars, the signal traveled on. It passed dead worlds and empty systems. It moved through clouds of gas and fields of debris. It carried the voices of a dying civilization toward beings who had never asked to be feared. And on a lonely planet called Earth, in a system forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, someone was listening. Commander Marcus Kane sat in his office aboard the orbital station Unity. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by old scars. He had been a soldier once, long ago. Now he was just a caretaker, watching over ships that would never fly, weapons that would never fire, an army that would never march. Humanity had accepted the quarantine. They had accepted their prison. For 200 years, they had worked on their own problems, fixed their own world, united their own people. They had become something different from what they once were, but they had never forgotten. Every human learned the same history. They learned about the aliens who came to watch them. They learned about the fear in those alien eyes. They learned about the boundary drawn around their solar system. They learned about the quarantine, and they learned to wait. Kane had spent his entire career preparing for a day he never truly believed would come. A day when the walls would come down. A day when humanity would rejoin the galaxy. His communication officer burst into his office without knocking. Sir, you need to hear this." Kane raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "A transmission. From outside the quarantine zone. From the Valanthi Consortium." Kane felt his heart stop for a moment. In 200 years, the aliens had never sent a single message, never acknowledged that humans existed. Nothing. "Play it," he ordered. The ambassador's voice filled the room. Kane listened without moving. His face showed no emotion, but inside, something was waking up, something old and powerful and hungry. When the message ended, he sat in silence for a long moment. "Sir," his officer asked nervously, "what do we do?" Kane stood slowly. He walked to the window and looked down at Earth. His home, his people, the species that had been locked away like dangerous animals, Now those same aliens were begging for help. The irony was not lost on him. "Sir," Kane smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Send this message to every military installation on Earth, Mars, and the Belt," he said. "Tell them to wake up the old ships, dust off the old weapons." He turned to face his officer. "Tell them the wait is over." "And the aliens? What should we tell them?" Kane looked back at Earth. Billions of humans going about their daily lives. Working, laughing, living. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea that their long exile was ending. "Tell them nothing. Not yet." His eyes were hard and bright. "Let us see what we are dealing with first. Let us see if these Valanthi deserve our help." He walked toward the door. "And prepare my ship. I want to be ready when the decision is made." His officer saluted and ran to carry out his orders. Kane paused at the door and looked back at the stars visible through the window. "They called us monsters," he murmured to himself. "They locked us away because they feared what we might do. Now something worse has come, and they want our help." He shook his head slowly. "Be careful what you wish for, Ambassador. You may get exactly what you asked for." In the shadows of the quarantine zone, in shipyards that had been silent for decades, lights began to turn on. Engines began to warm up. Soldiers began to wake from their long sleep. The Deathworlders had heard the cry for help, and they were preparing to answer. The message from the Valanthi Consortium spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every news channel on Earth was playing the ambassador's desperate words. Within days, every person in every colony knew what was happening. Commander Marcus Kane watched the reactions with interest. He sat in his quarters aboard the orbital station Unity, monitoring the feeds from a dozen different sources. On one screen, politicians argued about what to do. On another, ordinary people shared their opinions on social media. On a third, military commanders held emergency meetings. Everyone had something to say about the aliens who had locked them away for 200 years. Some were angry. They pointed out the unfairness of the quarantine. They reminded everyone of the generations who had lived and died without ever seeing the stars beyond their own solar system. They asked why humanity should help beings who had treated them like dangerous animals. Others were afraid. They worried about what would happen if humanity left the safety of their own space. They wondered if the aliens were lying, if this was some kind of trap. They questioned whether humans could fight an enemy that had defeated entire civilizations. But most people felt something different, something that surprised even Kane. They felt pity. The images that came with the transmission showed worlds burning, ships exploding, people dying by the millions. The Valanthi and their allies were clearly outmatched. They were helpless against the swarm, and despite everything that had happened, despite 2 centuries of imprisonment, most humans could not ignore a cry for help. Kane's communication device buzzed. He answered it. "Commander, the World Council has reached a decision. They want to speak with you." Kane nodded and made his way to the main conference room. The holographic projectors showed images of the 12 leaders who governed human space, presidents and prime ministers, chancellors and representatives from Earth, Mars, the Belt, and the outer colonies. They looked tired and worried. This was not a decision anyone had expected to make. President Chen of the Asian Federation spoke first. Her voice was calm but serious. "Commander Kane, you have reviewed the intelligence we gathered about this Kethvoran swarm?" "I have, Madam President." "What is your assessment?" Kane thought carefully before answering. "The swarm is dangerous, very dangerous. They have numbers that are difficult to comprehend. Trillions of individual organisms controlled by a hive mind. They attack without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. They have destroyed dozens of civilizations across multiple galaxies. Can they be defeated? Any enemy can be defeated. The question is whether we are willing to pay the price." Prime Minister Rodriguez of the South American Union leaned forward. "What price are we talking about?" "The consortium fleet was destroyed in 4 minutes," Kane replied. "They were fighting with weapons and tactics that have not been updated in centuries. They had no real military experience. They treated the battle like a negotiation they could win with words." He paused. "We will not make those mistakes, but we will take losses. Significant losses. Ships, soldiers, lives." The council members exchanged glances. Chancellor Schmidt of the European Federation spoke next. "Commander, I must ask the obvious question. Why should we risk those lives for beings who imprisoned us?" Kane had expected this question. He had been asking himself the same thing. Because of what we are, he said simply. Not what they think we are. What we actually are. He activated a holographic display showing images from human history, wars and battles, disasters and tragedies, but also rescues and relief efforts, humanitarian aid and peacekeeping missions, acts of courage and sacrifice. For 200 years, we have been told we are monsters, Kane continued. The aliens looked at our history and saw only violence. But they missed something important. They missed the other side of who we are. He changed the display to show firefighters running into burning buildings, doctors working in dangerous war zones, soldiers shielding civilians with their own bodies, ordinary people risking everything to help strangers. Yes, we know how to fight. Yes, we have a history of violence, but we also have a history of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We run toward danger when others run away. We stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. His voice grew stronger. The Valanthi and their allies are dying. Billions of beings who have done nothing wrong are being slaughtered by an enemy they cannot stop. They called out for help, and we are the only ones who can answer. He looked at each council member in turn. If we ignore that call, we prove the aliens right. We prove that we are nothing but violent monsters who only care about ourselves. But if we answer it, if we risk our own lives to save beings who feared us, we prove that we are something more. The council was silent for a long moment. Finally, President Chen spoke. The vote will be recorded. All in favor of sending military assistance to the Valanthi Consortium. 12 hands rose. The motion passes unanimously. Commander Kane, you will lead the expedition. How soon can you be ready? Kane felt something shift inside him. A purpose he had been waiting for his entire life. 3 weeks, he said. We need time to reactivate the old ships and recall our veterans. But we can be ready in 3 weeks. Then make it happen. And Commander? President Chen's eyes were serious. Bring our people home. Yes, Madam President. The next 3 weeks were the most intense in human history since the last World War. Across Earth, military bases that had been quiet for decades roared back to life. Ships that had been in storage were pulled out and tested. Weapons that had been locked away were cleaned and loaded. Soldiers who had retired years ago put on their uniforms again. Kane established his headquarters aboard the UES Prometheus, a massive dreadnought that had been built 80 years ago and never used in combat. The ship was a monster of war, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It had been designed for a war that never came. Now, it would finally fulfill its purpose. Around the Prometheus, a fleet began to gather. Destroyers and cruisers, carriers and battleships. Some were new, built in the past decade. Others were old veterans, ships that carried the memories of conflicts fought before the quarantine. All of them were crewed by humans who had volunteered for this mission. There was no shortage of volunteers. Kane walked through the corridors of the Prometheus, watching his crew prepare for departure. He stopped to speak with a young woman checking weapon systems in one of the firing bays. Lieutenant Chen, he said. Any relation to the president? The woman smiled. Her granddaughter, sir. She wasn't happy when I volunteered. I imagine not. Why did you volunteer? Lieutenant Chen was quiet for a moment. My grandmother told me something when I was young. She said that the true measure of a person is not what they do when it is easy, but what they do when it is hard. She looked at Kane with determined eyes. This is hard, but it is also right. Kane nodded and moved on. He encountered the same story everywhere he went. Old soldiers coming out of retirement because they could not sit idle while innocents died. Young recruits joining up because they wanted to prove what humans could be. Families saying goodbye to loved ones, knowing they might never see them again. In the medical bay, he found Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the ship's chief medical officer and xenostrategist. She was studying data on the Keth-Voran swarm, her dark face lit by holographic displays. What have you learned? Kane asked. The swarm is fascinating in a horrible way, she replied. They evolved as a superorganism. Individual drones have almost no intelligence. They are controlled by a hive mind that coordinates all their actions. Their weakness? Communication. The hive mind uses bioelectric signals and chemical pheromones to control the drones. If you disrupt those signals, the drones become confused. They lose coordination. They become just animals, acting on instinct. Kane considered this. Can we disrupt their signals? I believe so. Our electromagnetic warfare capabilities are far beyond anything the consortium had. We can jam their communications, scramble their signals, blind their sensors. But we will need to get close to do it, very close. That can be arranged. In the fighter bays, pilots ran simulation after simulation. They practiced combat maneuvers that would kill any other species. High-gravity turns that crushed the body against the seat, sudden accelerations that pushed blood away from the brain, precision attacks that required splitting-second timing. Human pilots had certain advantages that other species did not. Their reaction times were faster. Their tolerance for physical stress was higher. Their ability to think under pressure was unmatched. These advantages had evolved over millions of years on a death world where hesitation meant death. Now, those same advantages would be used to defend beings who had never faced real danger in their lives. In the cargo holds, Marines checked their equipment. Power armor designed for combat in any environment. Weapons that could punch through steel walls. Explosives, medical kits, communication devices. They trained in boarding operations, learning how to fight inside enemy ships. They practiced close-quarters combat, preparing for the moment when bullets ran out and fists became necessary. Sergeant Major James Washington, a veteran of 30 years, led many of these training sessions. He was old for a combat soldier, with gray hair and a face like weathered stone, but he moved with a speed and power that surprised younger soldiers. "Listen up," he told his Marines during one session. "The swarm has never faced a real enemy. They attack civilians who cannot fight back. They overwhelm defenders who do not know how to resist. They have never met anything like us." He held up a combat knife, turning it so the blade caught the light. "When your rifle runs dry, you use your pistol. When your pistol runs dry, you use your knife. When your knife breaks, you use your hands. When your hands are broken, you use your teeth." He smiled grimly. "A human is never unarmed. A human is never defeated until they are dead. And even then, some of us keep fighting." The Marines cheered. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Viktor Petrov worked around the clock to ensure the Prometheus was ready for battle. He was a large man with hands like tools and a mind like a computer. He had served on the ship since it was first launched, and he knew every system, every wire, every bolt. "The old girl is ready," he told Kane during an inspection. "Better than ready. I have made some improvements while she was sleeping." "What kind of improvements?" Petrov's eyes twinkled. "Let us say that the swarm will be very surprised by what this ship can do." Kane smiled. Human engineers had a reputation for creativity. They did not just follow specifications. They improved them. They modified them. They broke the rules in ways that made things work better. As the 3 weeks passed, the fleet grew larger. 300 ships of various sizes gathered in orbit around Earth. It was the largest military force humanity had assembled in over a century. It was also the first human fleet that would ever travel beyond the quarantine zone. On the final night before departure, Kane addressed the entire expedition. His image appeared on screens across every ship in the fleet. Millions of people watched from Earth and the colonies. "Tomorrow, we leave our home," he said. "We travel to help beings who feared us, who imprisoned us, who called us monsters and locked us away from the stars." He paused, looking at the camera with steady eyes. "Some of you have asked me why we should help them, why we should risk our lives for beings who treated us so badly. It is a fair question." He took a deep breath. "The answer is simple. We help them because we can. We help them because no one else will. We help them because that is who we are." He thought of the images from the consortium, the burning worlds, the dying people, the terror in Ambassador Telesizrin's voice. The aliens looked at our history and saw violence. They were right. We have a violent history. We have done terrible things to each other. We have fought wars that killed millions. We have created weapons that could destroy our world. His voice hardened. But that same capacity for violence also means we can protect. The same strength that destroys can also defend. The same fire that burns can also warm. He leaned forward. "The swarm thinks it knows what monsters are. It thinks it knows what terror feels like. It has spent millions of years as the hunter, the predator, the unstoppable force." A grim smile crossed his face. "Tomorrow, we teach them differently. Tomorrow, we show them what real monsters look like. Not the kind that destroy for no reason. The kind that destroy to protect. The kind that fight because others cannot." He straightened. We are human. We came from a death world. We evolved to fight, to endure, to survive against impossible odds. The galaxy feared us because they knew, deep down, that if we ever became their enemy, they would lose. His eyes blazed. The swarm has made itself our enemy. Not by attacking us, but by attacking those who cannot defend themselves. By slaughtering innocents. By consuming worlds full of children and families who never did anything wrong. He raised his voice. Tomorrow, we answer the call that came from the darkness. Tomorrow, we prove that humans are not just killers. We are protectors. We are guardians. We are the fire that burns the monsters threatening the innocent. The crew on every ship was silent, hanging on his words. Some of us will not return. That is the price of what we do. But those who fall will fall fighting for something worthy. They will fall knowing that they made a difference. They will fall as heroes. To him, he saluted the camera. Prepare yourselves. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we go to war. The transmission ended. Across the fleet, soldiers and sailors settled into their bunks for one last night of peace. Some wrote letters to loved ones. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Some simply lay in the darkness, thinking about what was to come. In his quarters, Commander Kane looked out at Earth one final time. The blue planet hung in the void, beautiful and fragile. His home, the home of 8 billion people who were counting on him. He thought about the aliens waiting for rescue. Beings who had never known war, never known fear, never known what it meant to fight for survival. They had called for help without really understanding what they were asking for. They had called for humans. Kane smiled in the darkness. You wanted monsters, he whispered. You are about to get them. In the morning, the fleet departed. 300 ships burning toward the edge of human space, toward the quarantine zone that had held them for 200 years. As they passed the boundary, alarms rang on alien monitoring stations. Automated systems that had watched for generations suddenly detected what they had been built to prevent. The humans were coming out. The Deathworlders were on the move, and the galaxy would never be the same. The journey to the Valanthi border would take 3 weeks at maximum warp speed. 3 weeks of traveling through empty space. 3 weeks of preparation. 3 weeks of wondering what waited for them at the end. Commander Marcus Kane spent most of his time on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the stars streak past the viewports. The ship moved faster than light, bending space around itself like a stone pushing through water. It was technology that humans had developed on their own during the long years of quarantine. Technology that the rest of the galaxy did not know they had. Around the Prometheus, the rest of the fleet maintained formation. 300 ships moving as one, like a pack of wolves hunting through the night. Destroyers and cruisers ran escort duty, watching for any threat. Carriers held thousands of fighters ready for launch. Supply ships carried enough food, ammunition, and spare parts to last for months. It was the largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond their own solar system. It was also the first. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo joined Kane on the bridge during the second day of travel. She carried a data tablet filled with information about their enemy. I have been analyzing everything we know about the swarm, she said. It is not good news. Kane did not turn from the viewport. Tell me. The Kethvoran evolved on a harsh world in a distant galaxy. They began as simple insects, but over millions of years they developed into something much more dangerous. Their hive mind allows them to coordinate billions of individuals as if they were one organism. She pulled up a holographic display showing the structure of the swarm. At the center was a single massive creature labeled Queen. The Queen is the brain of the entire swarm. She makes all the decisions, controls all the strategies, coordinates all the attacks. Every drone is connected to her through bioelectric signals. Without the Queen, the swarm falls apart. Then we kill the Queen, Kane said simply. It is not that easy. The Queen never exposes herself to danger. She stays at the center of the swarm, protected by millions of warrior drones. Her flagship is the size of a small moon. Getting to her would require fighting through the entire swarm. Kane finally turned to face her. What else? The swarm has different types of drones for different purposes. Worker drones gather resources and build ships. Warrior drones fight and kill. Scout drones explore and gather information. Each type has different strengths and weaknesses. She showed images of the various drone types. The workers were small and numerous. The warriors were larger, with sharp claws and thick armor. The scouts were fast and agile. The warriors are the most dangerous, Okonkwo continued. They are bred for combat. They feel no pain. They never retreat. They fight until they are destroyed. How do they compare to our soldiers? Okonkwo hesitated. Individually, a human soldier is superior. Our people are smarter, more adaptable, better at improvising. But the swarm does not fight individually. They attack in waves, overwhelming their enemies with numbers. Kane nodded slowly. He had expected as much. The swarm was not a thinking enemy. It was a natural disaster. You could not negotiate with it. You could not reason with it. You could only survive it or be consumed by it. What about their ships? Mostly organic. They grow their vessels from biological material harvested from conquered worlds. The ships are tough but not sophisticated. They rely on ramming attacks and boarding actions rather than long-range weapons. So they get close and swarm their targets. Exactly. The consortium fleet was destroyed because they tried to fight at long range. The swarm just kept coming until they were surrounded and overwhelmed. Kane smiled slightly. Then we will have to change the rules. He walked to the tactical display at the center of the bridge. With a few commands, he pulled up a map of the Meridian system where the consortium survivors were trapped. Station Meridian is here, he said, pointing. The swarm has surrounded it. According to the latest intelligence, they have approximately 100,000 ships in the system. Okonkwo winced. We have 300. We have 300 human ships, Kane corrected. There is a difference. He began marking positions on the map. The swarm expects its enemies to be afraid. It expects them to run or surrender. It has never faced an opponent who attacks directly, who fights without fear, who keeps coming, no matter the cost. He looked at Okonkwo with hard eyes. We will not fight like the consortium. We will not stand at long range and hope for the best. We will attack them head-on. We will charge into their formation and tear them apart from the inside. That is insane, Okonkwo said quietly. That is human. Over the next 2 weeks, Kane worked with his officers to develop a detailed battle plan. Every ship was assigned a role. Every captain knew their objectives. Every soldier understood what was expected of them. The plan was simple in concept but incredibly difficult in execution. The fleet would not try to defend a position. Instead, it would attack constantly, never giving the swarm a chance to organize. Hit and run. Strike and fade. Keep moving. Keep fighting. Never stop. The key was disrupting the swarm's communication network. Okonkwo had identified the frequencies used by the hive mind to control its drones. Human electronic warfare systems could jam those signals, cutting off groups of drones from the Queen's control. Without guidance, the drones would become confused and disorganized. While the main fleet engaged the swarm, special teams would target the Queen's flagship. Marine assault groups would board the massive vessel and fight their way to the Queen herself. It was a suicide mission in all but name, but it was also the only way to end the war quickly. During the journey, Kane made a point of visiting every part of the fleet. He traveled by shuttle from ship to ship, speaking with crews, inspecting equipment, boosting morale. He wanted every person under his command to know that their leader was with them, that he would not ask them to do anything he would not do himself. On the destroyer Relentless, he met Captain James Park, a young officer on his first combat command. Sir, may I ask you something? Park said as they toured the ship. Of course. Do you think we can win? Kane stopped walking and looked at the young captain. Park was trying to hide his fear, but it showed in his eyes. Kane understood. They all felt it. I think we have a chance, he said honestly. A real chance. But I will not lie to you. This will be the hardest fight we have ever faced. We are outnumbered hundreds to one. We are facing an enemy that has destroyed civilizations. He put his hand on Park's shoulder. But we have something the swarm has never encountered. We have human beings. People who do not give up. People who fight harder when the odds are against them. People who have spent thousands of years learning how to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves. Park straightened slightly. The dinosaurs were bigger than us, Kane continued. The saber-toothed cats were stronger. The mammoths were tougher. They are all extinct. We are still here. That is not an accident. That is who we are. On the carrier Defiance, he spoke with Commander Lisa Rodriguez, who led the fighter wing. My pilots are ready, Rodriguez reported. They have trained harder than ever before, but some of them are worried about the numbers. They should be, Kane replied. Only a fool is not afraid before battle, but fear can be useful. It keeps you sharp. It keeps you alive. He watched the fighters in the bay. Sleek, deadly machines designed for speed and maneuverability. Tell your pilots this. Every one of them is worth 100 swarm drones. Not because our technology is better, though it is, but because they can think. They can adapt. They can make decisions in the chaos of battle that no hive mind can predict. Rodriguez nodded. I will tell them, and tell them something else. Tell them that when this is over, they will be able to look at their children and say they were there. They were part of the moment when humanity showed the galaxy what we really are. On the Marine transport Hammer, Kane met with Sergeant Major Washington and his assault teams. We have been practicing boarding operations day and night, Washington reported. The boys are ready. Eager, even. Kane looked at the Marines training in the cargo bay. They moved with deadly precision, clearing rooms and engaging targets with brutal efficiency. You understand your mission? Yes, sir. We board the Queen's flagship. We fight through whatever is inside. We kill the Queen. And if you cannot reach her? Washington smiled. His teeth were very white against his dark skin. Then we make her life very difficult until someone else can. Kane nodded. Washington was a true soldier. He understood that some missions required sacrifice. He had accepted that reality long ago. James, Kane said, using the sergeant's first name. I need you to understand something. If you board that ship, you may not come back. The odds are not good. I know, sir. And you are still willing to go? Washington looked at his Marines. Young men and women who had volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. Sir, I have been a soldier my whole life. I have served in peacetime, knowing that war might never come. I trained for battles I might never fight. I prepared for an enemy I might never face. His eyes were calm. Now the war is here. The enemy is real. Everything I have done has been for this moment. He straightened to attention. I will take my Marines onto that ship. We will fight through everything they throw at us. And we will give the rest of the fleet the chance to win this war. Kane returned the salute. Good hunting, Sergeant Major. As the days passed, something changed in the fleet. The nervous energy of the beginning transformed into focused determination. The fear did not disappear, but it became something else. Something useful. Humans had a long history of finding courage in dark times, when everything seemed hopeless, when the odds were impossible, when death seemed certain. Something deep inside them rose up. Something ancient, something unbreakable. They began to talk about the mission differently, not as a desperate gamble, but as a chance to prove something, to show the galaxy that humans were not just violent animals. They were warriors, protectors, guardians of those who could not protect themselves. Stories began to spread through the fleet. Stories of human history. Stories of battles fought against impossible odds. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held against thousands. Stalingrad, where soldiers fought house by house, room by room. Normandy, where men charged into certain death to free a continent. The stories reminded them of who they were, what they came from, what they were capable of when pushed to the limit. On the final night before arrival at Meridian System, Kane broadcast to the entire fleet one last time. Tomorrow we enter battle, he said. I will not give you false promises. I will not tell you that everyone will survive. Some of us will die tomorrow. That is the nature of war. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I will tell you this. Everything we do tomorrow matters. Every shot we fire, every ship we destroy, every life we save. It all matters. He thought about the consortium survivors waiting on Station Meridian. Billions of beings watching the darkness, hoping for rescue. The people we are saving have never known war. They have never experienced violence. They do not understand what it means to fight for survival. To them, we are something from a nightmare, something to be feared. His voice softened. Tomorrow, we show them what that fear can do when it is pointed at the right target. Tomorrow, we become the nightmare that defends them from other nightmares. He looked directly at the camera. Some people think courage means not being afraid. That is wrong. Courage means being afraid and fighting anyway. Every one of you is afraid right now. I am afraid too. But we will fight tomorrow. We will win or we will die trying. And either way, we will make the galaxy remember what humans are. He raised his fist. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. Across the fleet, Thousands of voices responded with a roar that could not be heard in the vacuum of space, but could be felt in the hearts of every person aboard. The Deathworlders were ready for battle. In the Meridian system, the swarm continued to circle Station Meridian. The Queen was pleased. Another civilization was about to fall. Another world was about to be consumed. Soon, there would be nothing left of the consortium but memories and dust. She had received reports of strange ships approaching from the quarantine zone. Ships that did not match any known design. Ships crewed by a species that had been imprisoned for 2 centuries. The Queen was curious, but not concerned. She had destroyed hundreds of species. She had consumed galaxies. These newcomers would be no different. They would learn what the swarm already knew. Resistance was pointless. Fighting was pointless. Everything was pointless except feeding the swarm. The Queen settled into her chamber at the heart of her flagship, content in the certainty of her victory. She did not know what was coming. She did not understand what a human being was. She was about to learn. The human fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Meridian system. 300 ships appeared from nothing, their hulls dark and angular against the stars. They did not hide. They did not hesitate. They burned straight toward the center of the system with engines blazing. Commander Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the tactical display update with enemy positions. What he saw was worse than the intelligence reports had suggested. Contact confirmed, Lieutenant Chen reported from the sensor station. Enemy vessels surrounding Station Meridian. Count is still updating. She paused. Sir, I am showing over 100,000 ships. Kane nodded slowly. The swarm was even larger than expected. The alien vessels filled the space around the station like a cloud of insects around a dying animal. They were waiting, circling, preparing to feed. What about the station? Still intact, reading billions of life signs. The refugees are still alive. Not for long if we do not move fast. Kane turned to his communications officer. Open a channel. All frequencies. Maximum power. I want every ship in this system to hear me. Channel open, sir. Kane stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. He spoke clearly, knowing that his words would be heard by both the aliens on the station and the swarm surrounding them. This is Commander Marcus Kane of the United Earth Defense Fleet. I am addressing the Kethvoran swarm. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You are in violation of basic decency. You have attacked civilians, destroyed worlds, murdered billions of innocent beings. You have acted without mercy, without honor, without any justification except your own hunger. On the station, Ambassador Telis Isrin heard the transmission and felt her heart stop. The humans had come. They had actually come. She did not know whether to feel relief or terror. Kane continued. I am giving you one chance, one opportunity to avoid what is about to happen. Leave this system, leave this sector, return to whatever corner of the universe you crawled out of, and never come back. The swarm's response was immediate. Across the Hive network, the Queen transmitted her contempt. These newcomers were bold, but boldness meant nothing against numbers. She had heard threats before. She had heard challenges from 100 species who thought they could resist. They had all fallen. The Queen ordered her drones to attack. 100,000 ships broke formation and surged toward the human fleet. They did not use sophisticated tactics. They did not need to. They simply overwhelmed their enemies with numbers, drowning them in bodies and firepower. Kane watched the wall of enemy ships approaching. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. Fear hung in the air like smoke. He smiled. I was hoping they would say that. He turned to his tactical officer. All ships, execute Phase 1, electronic warfare, maximum output. Tear their network apart. Across the human fleet, specialized equipment powered up. Antennas extended from hulls. Transmitters began broadcasting on every frequency the swarm used for communication. The signals were carefully designed to interfere with the bioelectric pulses that connected the drones to the Queen. The effect was immediate. The leading edge of the swarm attack suddenly lost coordination. Ships that had been flying in perfect formation began to drift apart. Drones that had been acting as one organism became confused, uncertain, afraid. They had never experienced silence before. They had always felt the Queen's presence guiding them. Now there was nothing. Phase 1 effective, Chen reported. Enemy communication network is degraded by 60%. Good. All ships. Execute Phase 2. Attack formation. We are going through them. The human fleet did something that no fleet in galactic history had ever done against the swarm. Instead of retreating, instead of trying to maintain distance, they charged directly into the enemy. The Prometheus led the way, her engines burning at maximum power. Behind her, the rest of the fleet followed in a tight wedge formation. Weapons began firing while they were still at extreme range, sending missiles and energy beams into the confused mass of enemy ships. The first wave of swarm vessels died without understanding what was happening. They had expected the humans to run. They had expected fear. Instead, the humans were attacking them with a ferocity that made no sense. On Station Meridian, the survivors watched in disbelief. The screens showed the human fleet plunging into the swarm like a knife into flesh. Explosions lit the darkness, ships died by the dozens, by the hundreds. But the humans kept coming. "They are insane," Representative Kvalin whispered. "They are throwing themselves into death." Ambassador Telesis Rin watched with different eyes. She had studied humans. She knew their history. She understood something that Kvalin did not. "No," she said quietly. "They are not throwing themselves into death. They are doing what they evolved to do. They are hunting." On the bridge of the Prometheus, controlled chaos reigned. Officers shouted reports. Damage alarms blared. The ship shook from impacts as enemy fire struck the shields. Kane stood at the center of it all, calm and focused. His eyes moved constantly across the tactical display, tracking the flow of battle. "Carrier Defiance, launch all fighters. I want them hitting the flanks, keeping the swarm confused." "Aye, sir, fighters launching." Commander Rodriguez's voice came over the fleet channel. "This is Defiance Actual. All wings, you are clear to engage. Hunt in packs, watch each other's backs, and kill anything that moves." Thousands of human fighters poured from the carrier bays. They were small and fast, too agile for the clumsy swarm vessels to track. They swooped through the enemy formation, firing at exposed weak points, dodging return fire with impossible maneuvers. Pilot Lieutenant Maria Santos led a squadron of 12 fighters into a cluster of warrior drones. Her targeting computer screamed warnings as enemy ships surrounded her. "Break formation," she ordered. "Individual targeting. Make them chase you." Her squadron scattered, each fighter drawing a trail of pursuing drones. Santos pulled her ship into a high G turn that crushed her against her seat. A normal pilot would have blacked out. She barely felt it. The pursuing drones tried to follow and failed. They were not designed for such maneuvers. They crashed into each other, into debris, into nothing at all. Santos finished her turn and came up behind the survivors, destroying them with precise bursts of fire. "Squadron report. All 12 still flying lead. Ready for another run. Then let us give them one." In the main battle, the human fleet tore through the swarm like wolves through sheep. The alien ships had numbers, but the humans had something more important: coordination and intelligence. Every human ship knew its role. Every captain understood the overall strategy. They worked together in ways the swarm could not match. When one ship was threatened, others moved to support it. When an opportunity appeared, multiple ships exploited it simultaneously. The swarm fought with mindless aggression. The humans fought with calculated fury. Kane watched the battle develop and knew they were winning. Not the war, not yet, but this first engagement. The swarm was losing ships faster than the humans. The alien formation was beginning to fracture, but he also knew the victory was incomplete. The Queen was still alive, still commanding, still sending fresh drones to replace the fallen. As long as she lived, the swarm would keep coming. They had to cut off the head. "Status on Phase 3? He asked. "Marine assault teams are standing by," his tactical officer reported. "The Queen's flagship has been located. It is at the center of the swarm formation, protected by multiple defensive rings." "Show me." The display zoomed in on a massive vessel at the heart of the enemy fleet. It was the size of a small moon, covered in organic growth and weapon emplacements. Thousands of smaller ships surrounded it, forming layer after layer of protection. "Getting through those defenses will be extremely difficult," the officer said. "Then we make it less difficult." Kane opened a channel to the assault transports. "Sergeant Major Washington, this is Kane. Are your teams ready?" Washington's voice came back steady and confident. "Ready and waiting, sir. The Queen's flagship is heavily defended. We are going to punch a hole through those defenses. When we do, you have maybe 5 minutes to reach the ship and board it before they close the gap." Understood. We will be ready. Kane turned back to the main battle. All ships, new orders. We are pushing through to the Queen. Everything we have, focused on one point. Create a corridor for the assault teams. The human fleet began to reorganize. Ships that had been fighting across a wide area started moving together, forming a concentrated force. They stopped trying to destroy the swarm and started trying to break through it. The fighting intensified. Human ships took damage but kept flying. Crews worked frantically to repair systems while under fire. Medical teams treated wounded soldiers in corridors lit by emergency lights. On the destroyer Relentless, Captain Park watched his forward shields fail under concentrated enemy fire. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Hull breach on Deck 7. Sealing emergency bulkheads. Forward weapons offline. Switching to secondary systems. Park gripped his chair as the ship shook from another impact. Through the viewport, he could see enemy ships everywhere. They were surrounded. "Sir," his first officer shouted. "We cannot take much more of this." Park looked at the tactical display. The Relentless was at the front of the formation, taking the worst of the enemy fire. Behind them, the assault transports were getting closer to their target, closer to the Queen. "We hold position," Park ordered. "The Marines need us to clear the way." "Sir, the ship. I know what condition my ship is in." Park's voice was hard. "And I know what we came here to do. We hold this position until the Marines are through, or we die holding it. Those are our options." His crew looked at him. They were afraid. They were exhausted. But they were also human. They understood duty. They understood sacrifice. "All hands," Park announced over the ship's intercom. "This is the captain. We are taking heavy damage, but we are not retreating. Behind us, our people are trying to end this war. We are their shield. We hold the line." He paused. "I will not promise that we will survive this. I will only promise that what we do matters. Today, we fight for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. Today, we show the galaxy what humans are made of." He sat back in his chair. "All weapons, continuous fire. Engineering, keep us flying as long as possible. We are not done yet." The Relentless kept fighting. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out on 100 ships. Human crews pushed their vessels beyond all reasonable limits. They fought through damage that should have destroyed them. They kept firing when their weapons overheated, kept flying when their engines burned out, kept going long after they should have stopped. On the carrier Defiance, a fire broke out in the fighter bay. Commander Rodriguez personally led the damage control team, fighting flames while ammunition exploded around her. She lost 3 crew members but saved the bay and the fighters it contained. On the cruiser Horizon, Chief Engineer Kim literally held a power coupling together with his bare hands for 15 minutes while his team rerouted the system. The burns he received would scar him for life. He never let go. On the destroyer Thunder, a Marine corporal named Davis sealed herself in a compartment that was venting to space, welding the door shut from the inside so the rest of her section would not decompress. She froze to death before rescue teams could reach her. These stories would be told for generations. The day the humans came for the swarm, the day the Deathworlders showed what they could do. In the command chamber of her flagship, the Queen felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. The newcomers were not dying fast enough. They were not breaking. They were not running. Every time she thought she had them contained, they found a way through. Every time she sent drones to destroy a damaged ship, other human vessels appeared to defend it, and they were getting closer. The Queen increased her control over the defensive rings around her flagship. She pulled drones from the outer battle to strengthen her personal protection. She would not be threatened by these primitives, but even as she made these adjustments, she felt something else. A whisper of fear. These beings were different. They did not fight like prey. They fought like predators, like hunters, like something she had never encountered before. On the Prometheus, Kane watched the corridor form. Human ships had pushed through 3 layers of swarm defense. 1 more layer remained between the assault transports and the Queen's flagship. Washington, prepare for deployment. 30 seconds. Assault teams are in position. Ready on your word. Kane looked at the tactical display one more time. The cost had been high. 23 human ships destroyed. 40 more heavily damaged. Thousands of lives lost. But they had done what no other fleet had ever accomplished. They had reached the Queen. "Deploy the Marines," Kane ordered. "And may God go with them." 10 assault transports burned toward the Queen's flagship. They were small and fast, built for a single purpose: getting soldiers onto enemy ships. Each one carried 50 Marines in full combat armor. Swarm defenders tried to intercept them. Human fighters swooped in to engage, drawing fire away from the transports. The cruiser Horizon put itself directly in the path of a swarm of missiles. Taking the hits meant for the Marines. The transports reached the flagship. Sergeant Major Washington felt his transport slam into the hull of the alien vessel. Cutting charges burned through the organic material, creating an opening. The Marines poured out into a corridor that looked like the inside of a living creature. "Move," Washington shouted. "Stay together. Watch your sectors." The Marines advanced into the darkness. Somewhere ahead was the Queen. Somewhere ahead was the creature that controlled the entire swarm. Behind them, the battle continued to rage. Human ships fighting and dying to give them this chance. A chance to end the war. Washington gripped his weapon tighter and led his soldiers deeper into the heart of the enemy. The hunt was on. The inside of the Queen's flagship was like nothing the Marines had ever seen. The walls were made of living tissue, pulsing slowly like the inside of some massive heart. The air was thick and wet, filled with strange smells that their helmet filters struggled to process. Lights that were not lights glowed faintly in the organic corridors, casting everything in a sickly green haze. Sergeant Major Washington led his team deeper into the ship. Behind him, 50 Marines moved in tight formation, their weapons sweeping every corner, every shadow. They had trained for this. They were ready for this. The first attack came without warning. Warrior drones burst from openings in the walls, their claws slashing, their mandibles snapping. They were twice the size of a human, covered in thick armor, bred for a single purpose: killing. "Contact front!" Washington shouted. "Open fire!" The corridor exploded with gunfire. Human rifles spat armor-piercing rounds into the charging drones. The first wave fell, their bodies torn apart by concentrated fire. But more came. Always more. A drone reached Private Santos before she could react. Its claws punched through her armor, lifting her off the ground. She screamed and kept firing, emptying her entire magazine into the creature's face from point-blank range. They died together. "Grenades," Washington ordered. "Clear the corridor." Explosions rocked the hallway, shredding the remaining drones. The Marines pushed forward, stepping over the bodies of their enemies and their friends. Washington did not look back. He could not. The mission was all that mattered. They encountered 3 more ambushes in the next 10 minutes. Each time, the Marines lost soldiers. Each time, they kept moving. There was no retreat. There was no surrender. There was only forward. Private Jenkins lost his arm to a drone's claw. Corporal Davis applied a tourniquet, injected him with painkillers, and Jenkins kept fighting with his remaining hand. Sergeant Morrison took a hit that punctured his lung. He coughed blood and kept running, refusing to slow down until his body simply stopped working. His squad carried his body until they had to leave it behind. The Marines were dying, but they were also killing. The corridors of the Queen's flagship became choked with the bodies of warrior drones. The humans did not just fight. They fought with a savagery that the drones had never encountered. When ammunition ran low, the Marines used their knives. When knives broke, they used whatever they could find. Pieces of debris, their own helmets, their bare hands. One Marine, a young woman named Rodriguez, found herself cornered by a warrior drone with no weapon and no way out. She waited until the creature lunged at her, then threw herself forward, jamming her armored forearm into its mouth as its mandibles clamped down. While it bit through her arm, she reached up with her other hand and drove her thumb through its eye, into its brain. The drone died. Rodriguez collapsed, her arm ruined, but she was still alive. Washington found her and helped her stand. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can fight," she replied through gritted teeth. He handed her a pistol from a fallen Marine. She took it with her remaining good hand. They kept moving. 30 minutes into the assault, Washington had lost more than half his Marines. The survivors were wounded, exhausted, running low on everything, but they had also covered tremendous ground. According to his tactical display, the Queen's chamber was just ahead. "Listen up," he said to his remaining soldiers. "We are almost there. The Queen is beyond that door. We go in hard and fast. We kill everything we see. No hesitation. No mercy. He looked at each of them. Kids, most of them. Young men and women who had volunteered for a mission they knew would probably kill them. They looked back at him with tired eyes and steady hands. "It has been an honor serving with you," Washington said. He kicked in the door. The Queen's chamber was vast, a cathedral of organic architecture that stretched in all directions. Bioluminescent growths cast strange light across walls that seemed to breathe. And at the center, surrounded by her most elite guards, was the Queen herself. She was massive. Her body filled half the chamber, a bloated mass of flesh and chitin supported by dozens of thick legs. Her head was crowned with sensor organs that tracked the intruders as they entered. Her mandibles, each one as long as a human was tall, opened to release a sound that was halfway between a scream and a roar. Washington had seen a lot of ugly things in his career. The Queen was the ugliest. "Kill her," he ordered. The Marines opened fire. The Queen's guards charged. The chamber became a slaughterhouse. Washington fought like a man possessed. His rifle ran dry and he threw it at a drone, stunning the creature long enough to draw his pistol and shoot it through the skull. His pistol ran dry and he drew his knife, slashing and stabbing at anything that came near. Around him, his Marines were dying. One by one, they fell to the endless waves of drones that poured from hidden chambers to defend their Queen. But each Marine took a dozen drones with them. Each death was bought at a terrible price, and they were getting closer to the Queen. The massive creature watched the battle with growing concern. These beings would not stop. She had seen them take wounds that should have killed them instantly, only to keep fighting. She had seen them throw themselves at her guards with no regard for their own survival. What were these creatures? Private Chen was the first to reach the Queen. He had been shot, stabbed, and burned. His armor was in pieces. He had lost his weapons somewhere in the fighting, but he was still moving. He grabbed a piece of debris from the ground and charged at the Queen's exposed flank. He drove the metal shard into her flesh with all his remaining strength, opening a wound that leaked black blood. The Queen screamed. One of her massive legs swept Chen away like a toy, crushing him against the far wall. But other Marines saw what he had done. They saw that the Queen could be hurt. They attacked with renewed fury. Washington found himself face to face with the Queen. Her sensor organs focused on him, reading his heat signature, his heartbeat, his brain activity. She tried to understand what she was looking at. She saw a predator, not a simple predator, not something that killed only when hungry, only when necessary. She saw a creature that had evolved to fight, a creature that had spent its entire evolutionary history struggling against impossible odds, a creature that had learned to kill not just to survive, but to protect. For the first time in her million-year existence, the Queen felt true fear. Washington raised a grenade. Not a regular grenade, a special one, designed for exactly this moment. Antimatter containment, set to detonate on impact. "You wanted to consume everything," he said. "Consume this." He threw the grenade into the Queen's open mouth. The explosion was spectacular. The Queen's head detonated in a blast of light and fire that sent shockwaves through the entire ship. Her body thrashed wildly, destroying everything around it, including the remaining drones and several of the surviving Marines. Washington was thrown against a wall. He felt bones break. He tasted blood. But through the smoke and debris, he saw the Queen's body collapse, saw the life fade from her sensor organs, saw her massive legs stop moving. She was dead. The Queen of the Kethvoran swarm was dead. Outside the flagship, the effect was instantaneous. Every drone in the swarm suddenly stopped. They had been connected to the Queen for their entire lives, guided by her will, controlled by her mind. Now there was nothing. Silence. Emptiness. The drones went mad. Without the Queen to coordinate them, they turned on each other. They crashed into debris, into other drones, into nothing at all. They became animals, driven by instinct and confusion. On the Prometheus, Commander Kane watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "The swarm is breaking. They are destroying each other." Kane allowed himself a small smile. "The Marines did it. They actually did it." The human fleet, battered and bleeding, began cleanup operations. They destroyed drones that came too close. They rescued escape pods from damaged ships. They collected their dead. When the battle finally ended, 18 hours after it began, the Kethvoran swarm had been destroyed. Not defeated. Destroyed. Without the Queen, the hive mind could not function. The surviving drones would eventually starve or kill each other. The threat was over. On Station Meridian, the survivors watched in stunned silence. They had expected to die. They had prepared themselves for the end of their civilization. Instead, they were alive. Ambassador Telis Rin stood at the viewport and wept. She wept for the billions who had died before the humans arrived. She wept for the soldiers who had given their lives to save strangers. She wept because she did not know what else to do. A communication request appeared on her console. She answered it with shaking hands. Commander Kane's face appeared on the screen. He looked exhausted, older than he had appeared in the original transmission. The battle had cost him something that could not be measured. Ambassador Telis Rin, he said. This is Commander Kane. The swarm has been neutralized. You are safe. She tried to speak and found no words. How did you thank someone for saving everything you loved? Commander, she finally managed. I do not know how to repay you. Your people died for us, for beings who locked you away, who feared you, who treated you like animals. Kane nodded slowly. Yes, they did. Why? Why did you help us? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired but warm. Because you asked. Because you were dying and no one else would help. Because that is what we do. He leaned back in his chair. My people have a complicated history, Ambassador. We have done terrible things to each other. We have fought wars that killed millions. We have created weapons that could destroy worlds. The galaxy was right to fear us. He looked directly at the camera. But we have also learned something in our long, bloody history. The same strength that destroys can also protect. The same fire that burns can also warm. The same species that invented the atomic bomb also invented the hospital. We are capable of great darkness, but also great light. Telis Rin listened, feeling something shift in her understanding of these strange beings. You called for help, Kane continued. You called into the darkness, not knowing if anyone would answer. But we heard you, and we came, not because you deserved it, not because you could repay us. We came because that is who we choose to be. He smiled slightly. The quarantine is over, Ambassador. Humanity is rejoining the galaxy. I hope you will find that we can be good neighbors, now that you have seen what we really are. Telis Rin bowed her head. We have much to learn about your people, Commander. I think our assumptions were wrong. Some of them were right, Kane admitted. We are dangerous. We are violent. We can be monsters when we need to be. But we can also be something else. We can be protectors, guardians, friends. The communication ended. Telis Rin sat in silence for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days later, she stood on the docking bay of Station Meridian as the Prometheus approached. The massive human ship was scarred and damaged, bearing the marks of the battle that had saved them all. But it was still flying, still strong. A shuttle detached from the dreadnought and flew toward the station. Telis Rin was waiting when it landed. Commander Kane stepped out, followed by a small group of officers. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. He had fulfilled his mission. He had brought his people through an impossible battle. Behind him, carried on stretchers, were the survivors of the marine assault. Only 7 of the 500 who had boarded the Queen's flagship had made it out alive. They were wounded, broken, but alive. Sergeant Major Washington was not among them. His body had been recovered from the Queen's chamber, still clutching his knife, surrounded by the bodies of a dozen warrior drones. He had died fighting. He had died smiling. Telis Rin approached Kane and stopped before him. She was not sure what protocol demanded. She was not sure what words were appropriate, so she simply spoke from her heart. Commander Kane, on behalf of the Valanthi Consortium and all the species you have saved today, I thank you. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Kane shook his head. No debt, Ambassador. We did what needed to be done. Your people died for us. My people died doing what they believed in, protecting those who could not protect themselves. There is no better death for a soldier. Telis Rin felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. What happens now? She asked. Kane looked out at the stars visible through the station's viewports. The same stars that had seemed so cold and threatening just days ago. Now they looked different, full of possibility instead of danger. Now we rebuild, he said. Your worlds, your fleet, your civilization. We will help where we can. We will share what we know. and we will make sure nothing like the swarm ever threatens you again." He turned back to face her. "The galaxy feared us because they saw our capacity for violence. Now they have seen what that violence can do when pointed at the right target. We are not just destroyers, Ambassador. We are protectors. We just needed the chance to prove it." Telesrin thought about everything she had believed about humans before this moment. The terror, the suspicion, the certainty that they were nothing but monsters. She had been so wrong. "You spoke of being neighbors," she said. "Friends. I would like that, Commander. I think the galaxy would be better with humans in it." Kane smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "We have a saying on Earth, Ambassador. Something we tell each other when times are hard and hope seems lost." "What is that?" "Help is coming." He looked at the refugee ships visible through the viewport. Millions of beings who had been saved by creatures they feared. From now on, when the galaxy is in trouble, when someone sends out a cry for help, they will know that help is coming. They will know that somewhere out there, the Deathworlders are listening, and they will know that the same species they feared for so long will be the first to answer their call. He extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "Welcome to the new galaxy, Ambassador. Let us make it a better one together." Telesrin took his hand. Her grip was weak compared to his, but steady. "Together," she agreed. Above them, the human fleet held position around Station Meridian. 300 ships reduced to less than 200, scarred and damaged but unbroken. They had traveled across the stars to save strangers. They had fought an impossible battle and won. They were the Deathworlders, the monsters from Earth, the species that the galaxy had locked away out of fear. And they had proven, once and for all, that there was more to fear than violence. That the same darkness that made them dangerous also made them strong. That the same fire that burned could also protect. Across the galaxy, the survivors of the swarm broadcast their warning to any hive mind that might listen. Do not go to the Orion Spur. Do not wake the humans. Do not make them remember what they are. But on Station Meridian, surrounded by the beings they had saved, the humans were not thinking about fear. They were thinking about hope, about a future where they would not be locked away, but welcomed, where their strength would be a shield, not a threat. Commander Kane stood at the viewport and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were learning what had happened, learning that the quarantine was over, learning that humanity had returned to the galaxy. Some would be afraid. That was understandable. They had been taught to fear humans for 200 years, but some would be relieved. Some would see what had happened here and understand that the monsters they feared were also the protectors they needed. And some, Kane hoped, would see something else entirely. They would see beings who had been imprisoned for their nature, who had every reason to hate the galaxy, but who chose instead to help, who came to save those who had feared them. They would see not monsters, but heroes. The Deathworlders had risen from the shadows. They had answered the call for help. They had proven that humanity was more than violence, more than darkness, more than the sum of their bloody history. They were protectors, they were guardians, they were human, and the galaxy would never be the same.
Ambassador Eth had lived for 347 cycles. In all that time, he had never heard a sound like this. The transmission played through the council chamber and every being present fell silent. It was not words. It was not a message. It was screaming. The screaming of millions. The holographic display showed Minor, a beautiful world of purple forests and silver oceans. They had built their colony there over 2,000 cycles ago. 12 billion souls called it home. Artists and scientists, teachers and farmers, children who had never known war. Now the planet burned. Eth's bioluminescent skin flickered with colors of grief as he watched the feed. Great clouds of black smoke rose from the cities. The forests were gone, replaced by something that moved like a living carpet across the land. The swarm had arrived, and they were hungry. "How long ago did this begin?" asked High Counselor N, her voice barely a whisper. 6 rotations, Eth answered. "We lost contact with the surface defense grid first, then the orbital stations went dark. By the time we received this transmission, the swarm had already consumed the northern continent." The chamber held representatives from 47 species. The Galactic Compact had maintained peace among the stars for over 10,000 cycles. They had treaties and trade agreements. They had cultural exchange programs and shared scientific research. What they did not have was an army capable of stopping The swarm was ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They moved from world to world like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Their bodies were chitin and hunger. Their minds were linked in a vast network controlled by a consciousness so alien that no species had ever successfully communicated with it. They did not negotiate. They did not make treaties. They only fed. "We must send relief ships," said Ambassador of the Methane Collective. His gaseous form swirled with agitation inside his containment suit. "Evacuate who we can." "To what end?" Eth asked bitterly. "Our ships are fast, but the swarm is faster. Any vessel that enters that system will be swarmed within hours. We would only be sending more food to the enemy." "Then what do you propose?" demanded Representative Al of the Silicon Mines. "That we do nothing, that we watch 12 billion die." Eth closed his 4 eyes. He had been an ambassador for 200 cycles. He had negotiated peace between species that had been at war for generations. He had helped build bridges across the vast distances of space. But now, faced with the death of his people, he could think of only one option. And it terrified him. "There is one species we have not asked for help," he said slowly. "One member of our galaxy that we have deliberately kept at a distance." The chamber went very quiet. "You cannot be serious," High Counselor said. "They are quarantined for good reason. They are dangerous beyond measure." "They are killing my people right now," Eth replied. "Every hour we debate, another city falls. Another million lives are consumed. The humans may be dangerous, yes, but the swarm is already here. What more do we have to lose?" The Galactic Compact had discovered humanity 300 cycles ago. The first contact team had approached Earth with the standard greeting protocols, expecting to find another species ready to join the great community of civilizations. What they found instead had shocked them to their core. Earth was a nightmare. The planet had a gravity that would crush most compact species. Its atmosphere was a corrosive mix of nitrogen and oxygen. The temperature swings between seasons would kill any within days. And everywhere, on every continent and in every ocean, life competed in a brutal struggle for survival. The humans themselves were the most terrifying thing of all. They were persistence predators, a species that had evolved to chase their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill other beings. They could survive the loss of limbs, the failure of organs, the most extreme conditions imaginable. They felt pain but continued fighting anyway. They experienced fear but did not let it stop them. And they were violent beyond comprehension. The first contact team had reviewed human history and fled in horror. Wars that killed millions. Weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. A species that had split the atom not to power their cities but to destroy them. They had poisoned their own world, hunted their own kind, and somehow continued to thrive despite every obstacle. The Galactic Compact had voted unanimously to quarantine the Sol system. Humanity was too dangerous to integrate. They were confined to their home system with a warning beacon at every jump point. "Do not enter. Species. Extreme caution advised." For 300 cycles that quarantine had held. The humans had developed faster-than-light travel on their own, but they had respected the boundaries set for them. They watched the galaxy from the edge, waiting for the day they would be accepted. That day had never come. Now, Eth was about to do something no ambassador had ever done. He was going to ask them for help. "The Council will not approve this," High Counselor warned. "If you contact the humans, you do so against our wishes." "Then let it be on my head," Eth said. "I will not watch my people die while we debate protocol. The humans have ships, they have weapons, and from everything I have read about them, they have something else we lack." "What is that?" asked Representative Al. Eth looked at the burning world on the display. They know how to fight. The monitoring station Serenity's watch hung in orbit around a neutron star at the edge of compact space. It was the closest outpost to the Sol system, maintained primarily to watch the quarantine zone and report any human activity. For 300 cycles, those reports had been the same. The humans remained in their system. The quarantine held. No action required. Eth arrived at the station 12 hours after leaving the council chamber. He had not slept. He had not eaten. Every moment that passed was another moment his people suffered. The station commander, unnamed, met him at the docking bay with confusion in her glowing skin. "Ambassador, this is unexpected," she said. "We received no advance notice of your arrival." "This visit is not official," Eth replied. "I need access to your long-range communication array." "Of course, but may I ask why?" Eth paused, was young, barely 100 cycles old. She had probably never even seen a human. To her, they were just stories. Monsters used to frighten children, the who lurked at the edge of civilized space. "I am going to send a message to Sol system," he said. "I am going to ask the humans for help." Bioluminescence flickered through a dozen colors before settling on pale white, the expression of shock. "Ambassador, the quarantine." "The quarantine means nothing if our species is extinct," Eth interrupted. "They are consuming minor as we speak. The compact has no fleet capable of stopping them. No one does, except perhaps the humans." "But how do you know they will help? They have every reason to hate us. We locked them in their own system for 3 centuries. Eth had thought about this during the long journey to the station. It was true that humanity had every right to refuse. The compact had treated them like dangerous animals, caged and feared. Why should they risk their lives for species that had rejected them? "I do not know if they will help," he admitted, "but I know that I must ask. My conscience demands it. If they refuse, then at least I will have tried. If they agree—" He trailed off, uncertain what would happen then. Led him to the communication center. It was a small room filled with equipment designed to monitor the quarantine zone. Eth sat at the main console and began composing his message. He kept it simple. He did not know how much the humans knew about galactic events. He did not know if they would even understand the threat. The message was short. A set of coordinates, a description of the enemy, and one word at the end, a word that felt strange coming from an ambassador who had spent 2 centuries as a proud representative of his people. "Please." He transmitted the message on the universal distress frequency. Any ship within range would receive it, including, he hoped, the humans. Then he waited. Hours passed, brought him food that he did not eat. Other station staff came and went, their bioluminescence showing curiosity and fear in equal measure. Word had spread about what the ambassador was doing. Some thought he was brave. Others thought he was mad. Most simply did not know what to think. Eth watched the communication display, hopping for a response. Any response. Even a rejection would be better than silence. At least then he would know that his message had been received. When the reply finally came, it was not what he expected. The display flickered. Static filled the screen, and then a face appeared. It was a human face, the first Eth had ever seen outside of historical records. The creature was female, with dark hair pulled back from her features and eyes that seemed to look right through the camera into Eth's soul. She wore a uniform of some kind, black with silver markings on the shoulders. "This is Admiral of the Terran Republic Navy," the human said. Her voice was calm, almost flat. "We received your distress signal. Identify yourself." Eth's hearts beat rapidly in his chest, 4 of them all racing with a mixture of hope and fear. "I am Ambassador Eth of the. A colony world of my people is under attack. The enemy is the swarm. They have already killed billions. We have no way to stop them." The human admiral did not react visibly. Her expression remained unchanged. "The swarm. I've read about them in the compact databases we've intercepted over the years. Locust-like species, consumes organic matter, controlled by a hive mind. Yes, Eth said. They are unstoppable. No fleet in the compact has ever survived an engagement with them. And yet you're asking us for help. A slight smile crossed the Admiral's face. It was not a warm smile. It was sharp like a blade. The species you've kept locked in our home system for 300 years. Eth felt shame burn through his body. His bioluminescence flickered red. I know we have no right to ask. The compact treated your people terribly, but I am desperate, Admiral. My people are dying. I have nowhere else to turn. The Admiral studied him for a long moment. Her eyes, they were brown. Eth noticed the color of Earth's soil seemed to be measuring him, judging him. How many are on that colony? She asked. 12 billion, perhaps fewer now. The swarm consumes quickly. 12 billion. The Admiral repeated the number slowly. That's a lot of people. It is, and they are innocent. They have done nothing to deserve this fate. Many of them are children, Admiral, young ones who have never harmed anyone. Something changed in the Admiral's expression. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around the eyes, but Eth caught it. He had spent 2 centuries reading the body language of dozens of species. He knew when he had struck a nerve. Children, the Admiral said. The swarm is killing children. Yes. Silence stretched between them. The communication link hummed with static. Eth wanted to say more, to plead his case further, but something told him to wait. The human was thinking, calculating, making a decision that would affect billions of lives. Finally, Admiral spoke again. Ambassador, I'm going to be honest with you. My people have been watching the compact from our little cage for 3 centuries. We've seen you build your utopia while we were left out in the cold. A lot of humans are angry about that. A lot of them think we should let the galaxy burn for how you treated us. Eth's heart sank. This was the rejection he had feared. The humans were going to refuse, and his people would die because of decisions made centuries before he was born. But the Admiral was not finished. However, she continued, I'm not one of those humans, neither is my crew. We joined the Navy to protect people, all people, and if there are children dying on that world, she paused, and for just a moment her mask of calm slipped. Eth saw something beneath it, anger, cold, focused anger. Then we're going to do something about it. Hope surged through Eth's body. His bioluminescence shifted to bright gold. You will help us. I'm mobilizing a response fleet as we speak. 12 ships. They're the best we have. We can be at your colony world in 3 standard days. 12 ships. Eth could not hide his concern. Admiral, the swarm numbers in the trillions. 12 ships will be enough. The Admiral cut him off with absolute certainty. Ambassador, you called us. You locked us away because you were afraid of what we could do. Well, now you're going to see exactly what that means. She leaned forward, and her smile returned. That sharp, dangerous smile that made Eth understand why his ancestors had been so afraid. Tell your council that the humans are coming. Tell the swarm too if you can reach them. And tell them this. We do not negotiate with species that eat children. We do not accept surrender from creatures that have shown no mercy. We are coming to that world and we are going to end this, one way or another. The transmission ended. Eth sat in the communications center for a long time, staring at the blank screen. He had done it. He had asked them for help, and against all expectations, they had agreed. But as he processed the conversation, he realized something that made his bioluminescence flicker with unease. The Admiral had not promised to save Minor. She had not promised to protect the. She had promised to end the threat. And the look in her eyes when she said it. Eth had seen many things in his long life. He had watched stars born and die. He had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. He had negotiated with beings so alien that communication required years of careful study. But he had never seen anything like the look in Admiral's eyes. It was not hatred. It was not anger, though anger was part of it. It was something deeper, something primal. It was the look of a predator that had just spotted its prey. They had stories about the tales told to frighten children, warnings passed down through generations. Do not wake the humans. Do not anger the monsters from the heavy world. They are not like us. They do not think like us. They are built for war in ways we cannot comprehend. Ev had always thought those stories were exaggerated, products of fear and ignorance. The humans were dangerous, yes, but surely they were still rational beings. Surely they could be understood. Now he was not so sure. He sent a message to the Compact Council informing them of his actions. He expected outrage, condemnation, perhaps even arrest. He did not care. His people were dying and help was on the way. 3 days later, when the human fleet arrived at Minor, Ev finally understood what his ancestors had feared. They had been wrong about They had thought the quarantine was to protect the galaxy from human aggression. They had thought the warning beacons were about keeping a dangerous species contained. They had been fools. The warning was not about what the humans might do. It was about what would happen when they were finally let loose. Ambassador Ev watched the human ships tear into above his dying world, and he felt something he had not felt in 300 cycles. Hope. Cold, terrible, beautiful hope. They had answered the call, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The orbital shelter Sanctuary 7 held 40,000 survivors. They had been floating above their dying world for 6 days, watching helplessly as everything they loved was consumed below. The shelter's life support systems were running at maximum capacity. Food was running low. Hope had run out days ago. Elder pressed her face against the observation port and watched the surface of Minor burn. She was 400 cycles old, one of the oldest alive. She had seen her world grow from a small colony into a thriving civilization. She had watched her children and build lives there. Now she watched it all turn to ash. The swarm moved like a living shadow across the continents. From orbit, it looked almost beautiful, a dark carpet spreading across the purple forests and silver meadows, leaving nothing but gray dust in its wake. The cities were already gone. The capital had fallen on the second day, had watched the great spires of the Academy of Light collapse as millions of drones swarmed through the streets. Her daughter had been in that city, her too. She had seen their home district consumed in real time on the orbital feeds. There had been no communication since, no final message, no goodbye. Bioluminescence had gone dark days ago. She no longer had the emotional strength to generate light. She was hollow inside, a shell filled with nothing but grief. Elder, a young voice interrupted her mourning. There is something happening. The sensors are detecting anomalies at the system's edge. Did not turn from the window. More swarm ships, probably. They always bring reinforcements when they find a rich world. No, Elder. These readings are different. The energy signatures do not match any profile. Station Commander is calling all senior staff to the observation deck. For the first time in days, felt something other than despair. Curiosity flickered weakly in her chest. She followed the young aide through the crowded corridors of the shelter, passing thousands of survivors who sat in silence or wept quietly in corners. The air smelled of fear and unwashed bodies. Children clung to parents who had no comfort to give. The observation deck was crowded when she arrived. Commander stood at the main display, his bioluminescence flickering rapidly with agitation. Around him, technical staff worked frantically at their consoles. "What is happening?" asked. Commander turned to her and his expression made her stop cold. He looked terrified. Not the slow terror of watching the swarm consume their world. This was something sharp and immediate. "We received a transmission from the monitoring station at Serenity's watch," he said. "Ambassador Ev has sent help." The Compact finally mobilized a fleet. No, his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Not the Compact, the humans. The word fell like a stone into still water. Silence rippled through the observation deck, felt her heart skip in their rhythm. Thus she breathed, "That is impossible, they are quarantined, they would never." "They are coming," pointed at the display. 12 ships. They entered the system boundary 4 minutes ago. At their current speed, they will reach our orbit in approximately 2 hours. 12 ships, repeated the number slowly. Against the swarm, that is suicide. I thought so too, but look at the sensor data. Studied the display. The readings made no sense. The energy output from those 12 vessels was enormous, far beyond what ships of that size should be able to generate. Their approach vector was aggressive, almost reckless. They were not trying to hide or maneuver defensively. They were heading straight for the planet at maximum speed. "What kind of ships are those?" someone asked. "Unknown configuration," a technician replied. "The hull composition does not match any database entries. The weapon's signatures are." She paused, rechecking her readings. "This cannot be right. These power levels would indicate weapons capable of cracking a small moon." "They are warships," said quietly. "True warships, not the defense vessels we build for peacekeeping, machines designed for one purpose." She had read the historical records about humanity. All learned about these as children, part of the standard education about galactic dangers. The humans had spent most of their existence fighting each other. They had developed weapons of terrible power. They had refined the art of killing to a degree that no other species could match. And now they were here. The next 2 hours passed in tense silence. The survivors gathered at every observation port, watching the stars for any sign of the approaching fleet. The swarm continued its work below, oblivious to the threat racing toward it. Clouds of spores rose from the consumed lands, spreading the biomass to new territories. In another few days, the entire planet would be covered. Then the stars bent. Had never seen anything like it. Space itself seemed to twist, reality folding in ways that hurt to look at. The human ships did not simply arrive. They tore through the fabric of normal space like predators bursting through underbrush. The transition was violent, aggressive, a statement of intent. 12 vessels emerged from the distortion. They were black, angular things covered in sharp edges and weapon ports. No curves, no elegance. They looked like they had been designed by beings who saw beauty only in efficiency and lethality. The lead ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of any compact vessel had ever seen. Its hull was and pitted, marked by old battles. This was not a new ship. This was a veteran, a survivor of conflicts that they could not imagine. "By the light," Commander whispered. "Those are not ships, those are weapons with engines attached." A communication signal burst through every channel in the system. The voice that spoke was female, calm, and utterly without fear. "Survivors, this is Admiral of the Terran Republic Navy. We received your SOS. Remain in orbit. Do not interfere. We will handle this." The message repeated twice, and then the human fleet began to move. They did not hesitate. They did not pause to assess the situation or wait for confirmation. The 12 ships split into 4 groups of 3 and dove toward the planet at speeds that should have been impossible. Sensor alarms screamed as the tracking system struggled to keep up. "They are heading for the swarm concentrations," a technician reported. "All 4 groups are targeting different continents simultaneously." "What are they planning?" asked. "Ground assault, orbital bombardment." As if in answer, the lead ship opened fire. Had seen weapons before. They maintained a small defense fleet, and she had witnessed training exercises where plasma bursts streaked across the void. Those weapons were designed to disable and deter. They were tools of last resort, used only when all other options had failed. What the humans unleashed was something else entirely. Beams of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit, cutting through the atmosphere like knives through silk. Where they struck the swarm biomass, explosions bloomed. Not small explosions, massive detonations that vaporized square kilometers of infected terrain in single strikes. The shock waves were visible from space, rippling outward across the dying land. But that was just the beginning. The other ships began deploying something. Thousands of small objects fell from their hulls, streaking toward the surface like a metal rain, zoomed in with the observation port's magnification systems, and felt her heart stop. Drop pods, troop transports. The humans were landing soldiers. That is madness, said. No ground force can survive against the swarm. The drones number in the trillions. They will be overwhelmed in minutes. I do not think the humans agree with your assessment, replied quietly. She watched the drop pods fall. Thousands of them, each one carrying human warriors directly into the heart of the infestation. It was the most aggressive military deployment she had ever witnessed. No caution, no hesitation, just a direct, brutal assault on an enemy that had never been defeated. A new voice came through the communication system. It was rougher than the admiral's, colored with an accent did not recognize. Sanctuary 7, this is Sergeant Major. I am attaching to your station as liaison, opening your docking bay now. Sputtered with surprise, opening our what? But the docking bay was already cycling. Someone, the humans presumably, had their security systems without apparent effort. Minutes later, a small shuttle detached from one of the warships and glided smoothly into the shelter's bay. When to meet it, she did not know why. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the need to do something, anything, other than watch helplessly. When the shuttle's hatch opened, she got her first look at a living human. Sergeant Major was tall by standards, nearly 2 meters of solid muscle wrapped in black combat armor. Her skin was dark brown, her hair cropped close to her skull. A scar ran down the left side of her face from temple to jaw, pale against the darker skin. Her eyes were the most striking feature, bright and alert, constantly scanning, assessing, cataloging threats. She moved like a predator. Every step was measured, efficient, wasting no energy. When she looked at, the elder felt a primal urge to flee that she had not experienced since childhood. Elder, the human said. Her voice was surprisingly gentle, given her appearance. I've been briefed on your situation. I'm here to keep you informed about the operation and ensure your survivors remain safe. You know my name. We know a lot about you. His lips curved into what might have been a smile. We've been watching the compact for 300 years. Not much else to do when you're stuck in one system. Felt a chill run through her body. 3 centuries of observation. 3 centuries of learning and preparing. The humans had been studying the galaxy all this time, waiting for their moment. Your ships, said. Your soldiers, they are attacking the swarm directly. That has never been done successfully. First time for everything. They have consumed hundreds of worlds. No force has ever pushed them back. Your people will die. His expression shifted. The gentle facade fell away, revealing something harder beneath. Some of us will die. That's what soldiers do. But we'll take a hell of a lot more of them with us than they expect. How can you be so certain? The human turned to look out the observation port. Below them, the battle had begun in earnest. Explosions dotted the surface like flowering stars. The orbital bombardment continued without pause, methodically destroying swarm concentrations while the ground forces pushed forward. You've read about Earth, right? Asked our. Yes, a Class 12. Extreme gravity, hostile climate, aggressive fauna. That's the official classification. Here's what it actually means. The Sergeant Major's voice grew quiet, almost reflective. Every creature on Earth evolved to fight, everything. The plants are poisonous. The insects carry diseases. The animals hunt and kill each other constantly. And we humans, we climb to the top of that pyramid by being the most stubborn, most adaptable, most violent species on the planet. She turned back to, your people see the swarm as an unstoppable force of nature, something that cannot be resisted. We look at them and see prey. Prey could not keep the disbelief from her voice. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Dangerous, sure, but predictable. They consume, they spread. They don't adapt, don't change tactics, don't learn from their mistakes. They're basically just really big locusts. Shrugged. We've dealt with locusts before. The observation deck shook as something massive exploded on the planet below. Turned to see one of the swarm hive structures, a mountain-sized organic construct that served as a regional command node, collapsing in flames. Human ships circled above it, pouring fire into the wreckage until nothing remained but ash. That was a hive node, whispered. They have never been destroyed before. First of many. Checked a device on her wrist. Admiral has authorized the deployment of the 3rd Orbital Drop Battalion, meanest sons of bitches in the entire Republic military. Why do you call them that? Smile returned, but this time it was fierce, almost feral. Because that's exactly what they're about to do. Watch. On the surface of Minor, in the ruins of what had once been the city of, the first wave of human Marines touched down. Their drop pods carved craters into the infected ground, and the soldiers emerged already firing. From her position in orbit could not see the details of the ground battle, but she could see the results. The swarm's advance slowed. Then it stopped. Then, impossibly, it began to reverse. The biomass is retreating, a technician reported, voice shaking with disbelief. In Sector 7, in Sector 12, across the entire northern continent, the swarm is pulling back. Impossible, Commander said. They have never retreated, never. They have now. Watched the tactical display with satisfaction. First lesson of dealing with humans, we don't know when to quit. The swarm is used to enemies that break and run. We're the opposite. The harder you push us, the harder we push back. Stared at the display. The impossible was happening right before her eyes. The swarm that had consumed her world, that had killed billions of her people, was being driven back by a force of mere thousands. How many soldiers did you deploy? She asked. First wave, about 50,000, more on the way. 50,000, against trillions of drones. Quality over quantity, tapped her armor. This suit can take hits that would vaporize your soldiers. Our weapons fire rounds that explode inside targets. Our Marines have been training for combat since they were old enough to walk. And more importantly, she paused, looking at the battle below with an expression that could not read. We're really, really angry. Angry. You sent us an SOS. You told us children were dying, that there was a species out here eating bobbies. The sergeant major's voice hardened. That's the one thing you don't do. You don't hurt kids, not in front of humans, because when you do that, you make this personal. And when it's personal, we don't stop. We don't negotiate. We don't accept surrender. We end you. Felt a shiver run through her body. The cold certainty in the human's voice was more frightening than anything the swarm had done. They killed because they were hungry. It was their nature, as impersonal as a natural disaster. The humans were choosing to do this. They had crossed the galaxy, deployed their forces, and engaged an enemy that had never been defeated, not for profit or territory, but because children were dying. Your admiral said slowly, she said you would handle this. What does that mean exactly? Was quiet for a long moment. Below them, the battle raged. Human ships continued their bombardment. Ground forces pushed deeper into swarm territory. The biomass burned. It means exactly what it sounds like, the sergeant major finally answered. We're not here to save your planet, Elder. That's just the first step. The first step toward what? Turned to face her fully. In the harsh light of the observation deck, her eyes gleamed with something that made take an involuntary step backward. The swarm attacked a world under our protection, killed innocents, ate children. That's a debt that needs to be paid. She gestured at the viewport. This is just the beginning. When we're done here, we're going to track the swarm to wherever they came from. We're going to find their breeding grounds, their queens, and we're going to burn every last one of them out of existence. You mean to commit genocide? I mean to make sure this never happens again, to anyone. His voice was flat without emotion. The swarm has been preying on this galaxy for 10,000 years. They've eaten hundreds of worlds, trillions of lives, and the compact just let them, ran away, hoped they wouldn't come back. She shook her head slowly. That's not how humans deal with predators. When a wolf attacks your village, you don't just chase it off. You hunt it down, you find its pack, and you make sure it can never threaten anyone ever again. The observation deck fell silent. The other survivors had gathered around, listening to the humans speak. Their bioluminescence flickered with a complex mixture of emotions: fear, hope, horror, gratitude. Elder looked out at her burning world. 6 days ago, she had been ready to die. She had watched everything she loved consumed by an enemy she could not fight. She had lost her daughter, her entire community. She had been hollow, empty, waiting for the end. Now the had come, and they were not just fighting the swarm, they were winning. For the first time since the attack began, allowed herself to feel hope. It was a strange hope, tinged with fear and uncertainty. The humans were terrifying in their own way. Their casual discussion of genocide, their obvious comfort with violence, their cold efficiency, these things disturbed her deeply. But they had come when called. They had answered an SOS from a species that had kept them imprisoned for 3 centuries, and they were doing what no one else in the galaxy could do. They were fighting back. Sergeant Major said quietly, "Thank you for coming, for helping us." Nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Don't thank us yet. We've got a lot of work to do before this is over. But I promise you this, Elder, the swarm will never hurt your people again. Not while there's a human alive to stop them." It was not a comforting promise. It was not the kind of reassurance that had hoped to hear, but it was honest. And in that moment, honesty was worth more than comfort. The battle for Minor had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The had existed for 100,000 cycles. It had consumed 347 worlds. It had absorbed the biological material of 812 species. In all that time, across all those conflicts, it had never encountered anything like this. The small creatures fell from the sky in metal shells. When the shells opened, the creatures emerged firing weapons that tore through drone bodies with terrible efficiency. They directed its forces against them, sending waves of warriors to overwhelm the invaders through sheer numbers. This tactic had worked on every world before. No species could stand against the endless tide of the swarm. But these creatures did not behave like the others. They did not flee when surrounded. They did not break when their comrades fell. They fought harder, moved faster, killed more efficiently as the battle wore on. And they made sounds that they did not understand. Sharp, barking sounds that seemed to pass between them even in the chaos of combat. Some of the creatures were actually smiling as they fought. They probed deeper into the conflict, trying to understand. It sent sensory drones to observe the invaders closely. What it learned disturbed the vast consciousness in ways it had never experienced. These creatures enjoyed the killing. Not in the way the swarm enjoyed consuming. That was simply biological satisfaction, the pleasure of feeding. This was something else. The invaders fought with a fierce joy, as if the violence itself brought them happiness. They shouted challenges at the drone warriors. They laughed when they destroyed hive nodes. One of them had painted symbols on his armor, counting the kills like trophies. The had absorbed the memories of countless species. It understood fear, despair, and hopeless resistance. It understood the desperate fury of cornered prey, but it did not understand this. These creatures had chosen to come here. They had traveled across the stars specifically to fight the swarm, and they were having fun. Something alien stirred in this vast consciousness. After 100,000 cycles of absolute dominance, of consuming everything in its path, the hive mind felt something new. Uncertainty. Lieutenant slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, and immediately put 3 rounds through the skull of a charging drone. The creature's head exploded in a spray of green ichor, and its body collapsed at his feet. "Contact left," he shouted, pivoting to engage a new wave of attackers. His squad moved with practiced precision, covering fire lanes and overlapping fields of death. They had been fighting for 6 hours straight, and they were just getting warmed up. The streets were unrecognizable. The beautiful alien architecture had been consumed by swarm biomass, transformed into twisted organic structures that pulsed with hideous life. The ground itself was soft and yielding, covered in the same gray matter that had swallowed the rest of the planet. His boots squelched with each step. He tried not to think about what he was walking on. "Sergeant, we've got movement in Building 4, Private reported through the comm. "Looks like a nest cluster, maybe 200 drones." "Light it up." Raised her grenade launcher and put 3 incendiary rounds through the building's entrance. The subsequent explosion sent a pillar of flame shooting skyward, and the screams of burning drones filled the air. Felt no satisfaction in the sound. These things had killed billions of innocent people. They deserved far worse than fire. His squad pushed forward, clearing block by block. They were part of a larger operation to secure the city center, creating a safe zone for evacuation operations. Other units were doing the same across the planet, establishing beachheads in the ruins of civilization. "Lieutenant, I've got something here." Corporal Obi's voice was strange, quiet. "You need to see this." Moved to the corporal's position, a collapsed structure that might once have been a school. The walls were covered in the intricate patterns that children had painted, now stained with blood and biomass. In the corner, hidden beneath a pile of debris, he found what Obi had discovered. A child barely more than a meter tall. Her bioluminescent skin flickered weakly, pulsing with terror. She was alive, but only barely. One of her arms was gone, consumed by the swarm. The wound had been cauterized somehow, sealing the infection, but she had clearly been hiding here for days. Felt something cold settle in his chest. He had seen death. He had killed more times than he could count. But something about this small, broken creature made his hands shake with rage. "It's okay," he said softly, kneeling beside her. The translator in his helmet converted his words into speech. "You're safe now. We're here to help." The child's 4 eyes focused on him. She should have been terrified. He was a monster from a nightmare world, covered in blood and carrying weapons of destruction. But instead of fear, he saw something else in her gaze. "Hope." "You came," she whispered. "The lights in the sky, they said they would come." "That's right, we came." Removed his helmet slowly, showing his face. "My name is, what's your name?" I need you to be very brave. We're going to get you out of here, but first I need to make sure you're safe. Can you walk?" The child tried to stand and immediately collapsed. Caught her, supporting her weight easily. She weighed almost nothing. "Obi, form a protective perimeter. We're moving this child to the point." "Lieutenant, our orders are to secure the city center," said carefully. "Command wants us at the objective in 20 minutes. Met her eyes, his expression left no room for argument. "Command can wait. We're not leaving children behind. Ever. Now move." The squad formed around in his precious cargo, weapons outward, scanning for threats. They moved through the ruined streets at careful speed, clearing corners and checking intersections. The swarm pressed against them constantly, sensing the living warmth of the child, but the Marines held the line. Clung to his neck with her remaining arm. Her bioluminescence was growing stronger, responding to the presence of protectors. She had been alone in the dark for so long, certain that death was coming. Now strange creatures from another world were carrying her to safety, killing anything that tried to hurt her. "Are you really from the Death World?" she asked quietly. "Yes, Earth. It's very far from here." "Is it true that everything on your planet wants to kill you?" Almost laughed. It was such an innocent question asked with such serious curiosity. Not everything. We have beautiful things too. Forests and oceans and mountains covered in snow. But yes, a lot of things are dangerous. Then how did you survive? We got tougher, smarter, meaner when we needed to be. He shifted her weight, keeping his rifle ready. The universe throws problems at you. You can either give up or fight back. Humans chose to fight. They reached the point, a cleared plaza where medical teams had established a temporary station. Survivors were already being treated there, dozens of them, pulled from the ruins by marine rescue teams. A medic rushed forward as approached. Pediatric case, severe trauma to the left arm. She's been in shock for days. Get her stable and on the next shuttle to the orbital shelters. The medic took a gently, already beginning treatment. The child's eyes stayed on as she was carried away. "Thank you," she called out. "Thank you for coming." Watched her go. Then he turned back to his squad and reloaded his rifle. Let's get back to work. High above the battle, Admiral watched the tactical display on the bridge of the unconditional surrender. The operation was proceeding better than expected. Human casualties were within acceptable parameters, and the swarm was in full retreat across 60% of the planet's surface. But was not satisfied. "What's the status on the hive node in Sector 15?" she asked. "Marine units are encountering heavy resistance," her XO reported. "The swarm is concentrating defensive forces around that location. It appears to be a command center of some kind." A command center implies a commander, studied the display. That has to be coordinating its forces from somewhere. If we can identify the central nexus, we can end this faster. "Ma'am, the is distributed across the entire swarm. Destroying one nexus won't kill it." "No, but it will hurt it. And when something hurts you, you make mistakes." Turned to her communications officer. "Get me I want their commander on the line." Minutes later, the grizzled face of Colonel Stone appeared on her screen. Stone was a legend in the Republic military. 3 decades of combat experience, more confirmed kills than anyone in active service, and a reputation for accomplishing the impossible. "Admiral," he said, "my people are having a good time down here. What do you need?" "There's a hive node in Sector 15. Intelligence suggests it's a major coordination point for swarm forces in this hemisphere. I want it destroyed." Stone grinned. It was not a pleasant expression. "Destroyed, ma'am, or erased. I want there to be nothing left. No biomass, no structure, no evidence that it ever existed. And Colonel, I want the swarm to watch it happen. I want them to see what we can do." "Understood. We'll handle it personally." The transmission ended and returned her attention to the battle. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating the complex dance of orbital bombardment and ground operations. This was what humans did better than anyone: organized violence on an industrial scale. Her XO moved to stand beside her. "Ma'am, if I may ask, why are we doing this?" "Doing what?" "This, all of this." He gestured at the display. "They aren't our people. The Compact has treated us like dangerous animals for 3 centuries. We have no obligation to help them." Was quiet for a moment. It was a fair question. Many humans had asked the same thing when the SOS came in. Why should they risk their lives for species that feared and rejected them? "Lieutenant Commander, do you have children?" she finally asked. "2 daughters, ma'am, 7 and 9. Imagine something came to Earth and started eating them. Imagine you called for help and no one came. Everyone was too afraid, too weak, too selfish to stand up and fight." His voice hardened. "That's what happened to they're not warriors. They're artists and scientists and teachers. They couldn't fight back. They had no one." She turned to face him directly. "We have spent 300 years being called monsters, the galaxy's boogeyman. Today we prove them wrong. We're not monsters, we're protectors. We're the ones who answer the call when everyone else runs away. And when this is over, when the Compact sees what we're capable of." Then they'll have a choice. They can keep fearing us or they can trust us. Either way, they will know the truth. Looked back at the display, at the planet they were fighting to save. Humans don't abandon people in need. That's not who we are. The XO nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good, now let's finish this. On the surface, Colonel Stone led his personal unit toward Sector 15. They were 60 Marines, the most experienced soldiers in the battalion. They had fought on 12 worlds and never lost an engagement. The swarm had no idea what was coming. The hive node was massive, an organic structure rising 300 meters into the air, pulsing with sickly green light. Thousands of drones swarmed around it, creating a defensive perimeter that would have stopped any normal force. Stone studied it through his helmet's tactical display. Pretty big target. Orders are to erase it, sir, his second-in-command reminded him. Yeah, I heard, Stone smiled. Let's give them a proper introduction to human hospitality. The attack began with precision strikes from orbit, weakening the outer defenses. Then the Marines moved in, a wedge of armored death cutting through drone ranks. Stone was at the point, his heavy rifle singing a continuous song of destruction. Drones fell by the dozens, then the hundreds. They reached the base of the hive node in 12 minutes. Stone planted the demolition charges personally, enough high explosives to level a small city. The swarm threw everything it had at them, trying to stop the humans from completing their mission. Marines fell, dragged down by sheer numbers, but their brothers and sisters filled the gaps and kept fighting. Charges set, Stone announced. All units fall back to safe distance. The retreat was orderly despite the chaos. Marines pulled back in stages, covering each other, never breaking formation. When they reached minimum safe distance, Stone triggered the detonation. The explosion was visible from orbit. The hive node ceased to exist, not destroyed, vaporized. A mushroom cloud of fire and debris rose into the sky, blotting out the sun. For kilometers around, the swarm biomass burned. The shock wave flattened everything in its path. And somewhere in the vast network of this consciousness, a scream of pain echoed through the hive. Elder watched the explosion from Sanctuary 7. The flash was bright enough to leave afterimages in her vision. When the light faded, a massive crater marked the spot where the hive node had stood. What was that? She breathed. Sergeant Major stood beside her, arms crossed. That was a message. A message. To the swarm, to the galaxy, to everyone watching. The human's voice was grim. We don't play defense. When you attack us, when you hurt the people under our protection, we hit back harder. We don't stop until the threat is eliminated. You destroyed an entire district. The devastation would have happened anyway. The swarm had consumed everything in that area. There was nothing left to save, turn to face. But now there's nothing left of them either. And more importantly, the knows what we're willing to do. Another transmission came through the station speakers. Admiral's voice, broadcast on all frequencies. Attention swarm forces. This is Admiral of the Terran Republic Navy. You have attacked a world under our protection. You have killed innocent civilians. You have consumed children. This ends now. The transmission continued, cold and precise. We are offering you one chance. Withdraw from this system immediately. Take your biomass, your drones, your hive ships, and leave. Never return to space. Never threaten any world under our protection again. A pause. If you refuse, we will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. We will destroy every hive, every breeding ground, every trace of your existence. We will not stop until the swarm is a memory. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Felt her heart's pounding. The ultimatum was unprecedented. No one had ever spoken to the swarm this way. No one had ever been in a position to make such demands. Will they accept? She asked. Shook her head, doubted. The doesn't understand surrender. It only knows consumption, but that's not really the point. Then what is? The point is that we gave them a choice. We're not butchers, we don't kill for pleasure, but if they force our hand—" The sergeant major's expression darkened. "Then what happens next is on them." Below, on the surface of Minor, the battle continued. But something had changed. The swarm's attacks were less coordinated, more desperate. There was reeling from the destruction of its hive node, struggling to reorganize its forces. And the humans pressed forward, relentless, unstoppable. In the ruins of, Lieutenant's squad had linked up with other Marine units to form a larger assault force. They pushed through streets that were slowly being cleared of biomass, liberating survivors from hiding places throughout the city. Most of the survivors were in terrible condition, wounded, starving, traumatized. But they were alive. And when they saw the human Marines, when they understood that help had finally arrived, their bioluminescence blazed with pure gratitude. Had lost count of how many people they had saved. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one was a victory, a small piece of light reclaimed from the darkness. "Lieutenant," Private called out, "we've got a signal from command. The swarm is pulling back." "Pulling back to where?" "Off planet, sir. They're abandoning the surface and retreating to their hive ships in orbit." Felt a surge of triumph. They had done it. They had actually pushed the swarm off a world. For the first time in recorded history, they were running. "Don't celebrate yet," Colonel Stone's voice came through the comm. "They're not surrendering. They're regrouping, preparing to flee to another system and start over." "Orders, sir." There was a long pause. When Stone spoke again, his voice was hard as iron. "Admiral says we're not letting them run. The fleet is moving to intercept. Ground forces are to secure the remaining population centers and begin full evacuation procedures. The Navy will handle the rest." Looked up at the sky, where human ships burned through the atmosphere in pursuit of the retreating swarm. He thought about the little girl he had carried to safety. He thought about all the children the swarm had consumed on this world and countless others. "Give them hell, Navy," he whispered. Above Minor, the hunt had begun. The swarm fled through the void between stars, and the humans followed. For 6 days, the pursuit continued across 3 systems. The hive ships were fast, their organic engines pushing them through space at speeds that few vessels could match. They had escaped countless enemies before, always running when the odds turned against them, always returning later to finish consuming their prey. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to stop chasing. Admiral stood on the bridge of the unconditional surrender, watching the tactical display as her fleet closed the distance. The swarm had split into multiple groups, trying to scatter and escape in different directions. She had split her own forces to match, sending hunting packs after each fragment. "Status report," she ordered. "Task Force Alpha has engaged the Western Cluster. Commander Park reports heavy resistance but is making progress. Task Force Gamma is pursuing the northern group toward the dead zone. They should intercept in approximately 4 hours." Her XO paused. "The main swarm body is heading for the system. That's where the bulk of this consciousness is concentrated." "Then that's where we're going," studied the display. "How many hive ships are we talking about?" 17 confirmed, with an estimated biomass capable of regenerating the entire swarm within a decade. If they escape, everything we've done here means nothing. "They won't escape." His voice left no room for doubt. "All ships, maximum burn. I want us in weapons range within 36 hours." The fleet accelerated. The crews had been operating at combat readiness for over a week, catching sleep in shifts, eating at their stations. Exhaustion was setting in, but no one complained. They all knew what was at stake. In the crew quarters, Marines cleaned weapons and tended wounds. The ground forces had been recalled from Minor once the evacuation was complete, loaded onto transport ships that now traveled in the fleet's protective shadow. They had lost 237 soldiers in the liberation. Each name had been recorded, each sacrifice remembered. Lieutenant sat alone in the mess hall, staring at a cup of cold coffee. He had not slept properly in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the ruins of the bodies half consumed by biomass, the empty eyes of children who had died in terror. And the little girl with one arm, looking at him like he was some kind of savior. "You should eat something," a voice said. Looked up to find Sergeant Major settling into the seat across from him. She looked as tired as he felt, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Not hungry," he replied. "Doesn't matter, you need fuel, we're not done yet." She pushed a ration pack across the table. "The Admiral is planning to end this. The whole swarm, Lieutenant. Every last one of them." "Good," the word came out flat without emotion. "They deserve it." Studied him for a long moment. "What's eating at you? And don't say nothing. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know the look." Was quiet. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of painted stone, covered in colorful patterns. He had found it in the rubble of the school where they discovered a kid made this, he said. Some child, probably not much older than 6 or 7 by human standards. They spent hours painting these little patterns, making something beautiful for their family or their teacher. His grip tightened on the stone, and then something came from the sky and ate them alive. "War is ugly," said softly. "That's why we fight to end it quickly." "It's not that. I've seen war. I've seen terrible things," met her eyes. "What bothers me is that this has been happening for 10,000 years. 10,000 years, Sergeant Major. The swarm has been doing this to worlds across the galaxy, and no one stopped them. The Compact just ran away and hoped they wouldn't be next. The Compact is afraid of war. They've built their whole society around avoiding conflict. And how many children died because of that fear? How many as hiding in rubble waiting for help that never came?" His voice cracked. "We were there, in our system, watching. We could have helped centuries ago if they had let us." Nodded slowly. "You're angry at the Compact." "I'm angry at everyone. At the swarm for being monsters, at the Compact for being cowards, at ourselves for sitting in our cage when we could have been out here making a difference." He looked at the painted stone again. "This kid should be alive, playing with friends, learning how to paint better patterns. Instead, they're nothing but organic matter in the belly of some drone. And that's why we're here now," leaned forward. "To make sure it never happens again. The Admiral's orders are clear. We're not stopping until the swarm is extinct. Every hive ship, every breeding pool, every trace of their existence. We're going to hunt them down and burn them out." Is that justice or genocide? Does the difference matter? Considered the question. In the abstract, it was a philosophical debate about the ethics of exterminating an entire species. In practice, with the memory of dead children fresh in his mind, it felt much simpler. "No," he said finally, "I don't think it does." They had never known fear. For 100,000 cycles, it had been the apex predator of the galaxy. It consumed, it grew, it spread. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could threaten it. The concept of fear was something it understood only through the memories of its prey. Now it understood firsthand. The human ships pursued with relentless determination. Every time the swarm tried to scatter, the hunters split to follow. Every time the sacrificed a portion of itself to slow the pursuit, the humans destroyed the sacrifice and kept coming. They did not tire. They did not hesitate. They tracked the swarm across the void like predators following a blood trail. And they were getting closer. They gathered the remnants of its consciousness in the 17 hive ships that represented the core of its being. These vessels contained the breeding chambers, the genetic libraries, the accumulated knowledge of countless consumed civilizations. If they survived, the swarm could rebuild. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, but they was patient. But the humans were not giving it that chance. In desperation, they attempted something it had never done in its existence. It reached out with its consciousness, seeking to communicate with its pursuers. Perhaps these creatures could be reasoned with. Perhaps they wanted something that could be given. The message went out across all frequencies. Not words, they had no concept of language but patterns, impressions, offers. Territory, the humans could have worlds, dozens of them, hundreds, systems rich with resources, free from swarm interference forever. Tribute, the would provide biological samples, genetic material, anything the humans desired. It would never again threaten any world the humans claimed. Submission. For the first time in 100,000 cycles, they offered to bend, to acknowledge another species as superior, to retreat into the dark spaces between galaxies and never return. Admiral received the transmission on the bridge of her flagship. She listened to the specialist's interpretation of the alien patterns, their analysis of what the was trying to say. "It's scared," she said finally, "genuinely terrified. It's offering us everything it has." "Ma'am, some of these offers are substantial," her XO noted. "If we accepted, we could gain significant territory and resources. The swarm would be effectively contained." "Contained," repeated the word like it was poison. "Until we let our guard down, until they rebuild their numbers, until they find another world full of children to eat." She shook her head. "No, this ends now." She keyed the communication system. "This is Admiral. I understand your offers. I have considered them carefully." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You came to a world of innocent people, artists and teachers and children. You killed them for food. You consumed billions of souls without hesitation or remorse. And now that you're losing, you want to negotiate." Her voice hardened into something cold and final. "No, you don't get to negotiate. You don't get to surrender. You don't get to continue existing. You've been preying on this galaxy for 10,000 years. That ends today. We are coming for you, and we will not stop until every last trace of your kind is ash." She cut the transmission. "All ships, maximum attack speed. I want us in weapons range in 12 hours. The fleet surged forward. 12 human warships against 17 hive vessels, each one the size of a small moon. By any reasonable calculation, it was suicide. The swarm still outnumbered them enormously in raw biomass. They could generate millions of drones, swarm them with organic missiles, overwhelm them through sheer weight of numbers. But the humans had something the swarm did not understand. They had technology refined through of warfare against each other. They had weapons designed to kill efficiently and completely. And they had a rage that burned cold and deep, a determination that would not be broken. The battle of system lasted 6 hours. The swarm threw everything it had at the human fleet. Drones by the millions, organic torpedoes, corrosive boarding parties. The human ships took damage. Armor plating melted. Weapon systems failed. Crew members died at their stations. But they kept fighting. Admiral directed the battle from the center of the chaos, her voice calm and steady as she issued orders. Each ship knew its role. Each captain executed with precision. They worked together like a single organism, far more coordinated than the swarm had ever expected. The hive ships died one by one. The unconditional surrender destroyed 3 of them personally, its main batteries tearing through organic hulls like paper. The smaller vessels in the fleet focused on the remaining ships, coordinating their fire to maximize damage. When one human ship was disabled, another moved to cover it, maintaining the integrity of the formation. By the end of the 4th hour, half the hive ships were debris. By the 5th hour, only 5 remained. There was in agony. Each destroyed hive ship took pieces of its consciousness with it. Memories accumulated over vanished in nuclear fire. Genetic lineages stretching back 100,000 cycles were erased in moments. The vast mind that had once spanned the galaxy was shrinking, fragmenting, dying. In its final moments, they understood something it had never grasped before. It understood what it felt like to be prey. The last 5 hive ships clustered together, trying to mount a final defense. Admiral studied them on her tactical display, noting the desperate concentration of drones around the largest vessel. "That one," she said, pointing. "That's where the primary consciousness is housed. Take it out and the rest will fall." "We're down to 40% weapons capacity, ma'am," her XO reported. "Half our fleet has sustained significant damage." "I don't care if we're down to one ship. In a harsh word, we finish this," keyed the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, concentrate fire on the central hive ship. Everything you've got. This is it." The human fleet attacked. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams stabbed through darkness. The swarm defenders threw themselves against the assault with mindless fury, trying to absorb the damage, trying to protect their. It was not enough. The central hive ship came apart slowly, like a dying animal. First, the outer sections ruptured, spilling biomass into space. Then the inner chambers cracked, exposing the breeding pools and genetic archives to hard vacuum. Finally, the core itself, the vast organic brain that housed this consciousness, was pierced by a direct hit from the unconditional surrender's main gun. The died screaming. Its final thoughts were a cascade of confusion and terror. It had existed for so long, consumed so much, grown so vast. It had never imagined that anything could end it. The universe was meant to be food. The stars were meant to be fuel. Everything existed to feed the swarm. And now the swarm was nothing but debris, slowly cooling in the void. The remaining 4 hive ships fell silent as their controlling intelligence vanished. Without the to guide them, the drones became mindless animals, attacking randomly or simply drifting in confusion. The human fleet destroyed them methodically, ensuring that nothing survived. When it was over, Admiral stood on her damaged bridge and looked at the field of debris that had once been the greatest threat in the galaxy. Bodies of drones floated past her viewport. Fragments of hive ships tumbled in the darkness. The last traces of a 100,000-year-old species burned and died in the cold of space. "It's done," her XO said quietly. "The swarm is finished." "Not quite," turned from the viewport. "There are splinter groups we detected earlier, heading for deep space. Small populations, maybe a few thousand drones each. They could rebuild given enough time." "Ma'am, we've just fought the largest naval battle in human history. Our ships are damaged. Our crews are exhausted. Surely." "Surely nothing." His voice was steel. "We made a promise. We said we would end the threat, not reduce it, not contain it, end it." She began issuing orders to her crew. "I want repair crews working around the clock, coordinate with the other task forces. We find every last splinter group, every hidden hive, every trace of swarm DNA, and we burn it all." "That could take months, years." "Then it takes years. I don't care if it takes a decade. They asked us for help. They trusted us to protect them, and I will not let their trust be misplaced." Over the following weeks, the Terran fleet scattered across the galaxy, hunting the remnants of the swarm. They found hidden colonies in asteroid fields, dormant hives on barren moons, small groups trying to rebuild in systems the Compact had abandoned centuries ago. Each was destroyed, no exceptions, no mercy. Lieutenant was part of the ground teams that landed on suspected swarm hideouts. He cleared nests with methodical efficiency, burning out every trace of biomass they found. The work was exhausting, dangerous, and seemingly endless. But every time he felt his resolve weaken, he thought about the painted stone in his pocket, about all the children who would never have to fear the swarm again. That was worth any amount of effort. Elder received regular reports on the campaign from Sergeant Major, who had been assigned to coordinate with the survivors. Each report described another swarm hideout eliminated, another threat removed. "How long will this take?" asked one day. "As long as necessary," replied. "Admiral is thorough. You are not just defending us. You are exterminating an entire species." "Yes." "Does that not trouble you?" was quiet for a moment. Elder, before I joined the military, I was a teacher. I worked with children in the areas of my homeland. I watched them learn and grow and dream about their futures. Her voice softened. I think about those kids when I look at what the swarm did to your world. I think about what would happen if something like that came to Earth. She met eyes. The swarm chose to be what it was. It chose to consume rather than coexist. It had 10,000 years to change, to find another way, and it never did. So yes, we are exterminating them. And I will sleep perfectly well tonight knowing that no child anywhere will ever be eaten alive by those monsters again. Did not know how to respond. The humans were so strange, capable of such violence, yet driven by something that looked almost like love. They killed without hesitation, but only to protect. They showed no mercy to the swarm, but infinite compassion to its victims. She thought about the Compact's decision to quarantine humanity 3 centuries ago. At the time, it had seemed wise. The humans were dangerous, unpredictable, violent. Better to keep them contained than to risk them turning that violence against civilized species. Now she understood how wrong that thinking had been. The danger was never that humans would attack the innocent. The danger was that they would defend the innocent with a ferocity that the galaxy had never seen. The swarm was gone. They had done what no other species in history could do. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Compact Council chamber had not been this full in 300 cycles. Representatives from every member species filled the circular hall, their bodies in containment suits and holographic projections crowding every available space. The air hummed with tension and whispered conversations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Eth stood at the speaker's platform, his bioluminescence steady and strong despite the weight of countless eyes upon him. Behind him, the human delegation waited in silence. Admiral stood at the center, wearing a formal uniform that somehow looked more like armor. Sergeant Major flanked her on one side, Lieutenant on the other. A dozen more human officers stood behind them, faces calm and unreadable. The chamber fell silent as High Counselor and raised her manipulators for attention. She was ancient, nearly 1,000 cycles old, and her voice carried the weight of generations. This emergency session of the Galactic Compact Council has been called to address recent events in space and surrounding systems. She paused, her multiple eyes scanning the assembly. Ambassador Eth has requested to speak. The council will hear him. Eth stepped forward. He had prepared for this moment for weeks, choosing each word carefully. Everything depended on what happened in this room. Distinguished representatives, he began. 3 cycles ago, Mayav Minor was attacked by the swarm. 12 billion of my people were killed. Our cities were consumed. Our civilization was nearly destroyed. The chamber remained silent. Everyone already knew this. The Compact could not help us. Our defense fleets were inadequate. No member species had the capability to fight the swarm directly. In desperation, I made a decision that violated centuries of established protocol. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the humans. I asked them for help. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their places. They came, Eth continued. They did not ask for payment. They did not demand territory or tribute. They simply came and they fought. His voice strengthened. In less than a standard cycle, the humans liberated Minor. They evacuated our survivors. They pushed the swarm off our world. He paused, letting the words sink in. And then they did something that no species in galactic history has ever done. They pursued the swarm across 3 systems. They tracked down every hive ship, every breeding ground, every trace of existence, and they destroyed it all. The chamber erupted. Voices shouted over each other in alarm and disbelief. High Counselor and had to bang her ceremonial staff repeatedly before order was restored. Ambassador Eth, she said carefully, are you claiming that the humans have exterminated the swarm? I am not claiming it, High Counselor. I am reporting it as fact. Eth's bioluminescence pulsed with absolute certainty. The swarm is gone. After 10,000 cycles of terror, after hundreds of consumed worlds and trillions of lost lives, the threat has been permanently eliminated. More murmurs. Some representatives expressed relief. Others showed fear. Many displayed emotions that Eth could not identify. This is genocide, representative of the Methane Collective declared. His gaseous form swirled with agitation. The deliberate extinction of an entire species. Regardless of the swarm's crimes, this is a violation of the most fundamental principles of civilized. Civilized. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. Admiral had stepped forward without waiting for permission to speak. Her voice was not loud, but it silenced the room instantly. Let me tell you about civilization, representative. Walked toward the center of the chamber, her boots clicking on the stone floor. I've read your history. The first appeared in compact records 10,000 cycles ago. In that time, they consumed 347 worlds. 812 species were absorbed. Trillions of sentient beings were eaten alive. She stopped, facing the assembled representatives directly. And what did this civilized compact do? You ran. You abandoned worlds. You drew lines on maps and called them quarantine zones. You let entire civilizations die because you were too afraid to fight. We could not fight, High Counselor, and responded. Our species are not warriors. We do not have the biological or psychological capacity for. I know. His voice softened slightly, but her eyes remained hard. You're not built for violence. That's not a criticism. The create beautiful art. The Methane Collective produces scientists who have unlocked secrets of the universe. The silicon mines have developed technology that humans can barely comprehend. Each of your species contributes something valuable to the galaxy. She looked around the chamber slowly. But none of you could protect the innocent when the monsters came, so we did. Lieutenant stepped forward, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small object, a painted stone covered in colorful patterns. I found this on Minor, he said, his voice quiet but clear. In the ruins of a school, a child made this. They spent hours painting these patterns, probably as a gift for someone they loved. He held up the stone for the assembly to see. That child is dead, eaten by the swarm while the compact debated protocol. He placed the stone on the speaker's platform. We didn't exterminate the swarm because we wanted to. We did it because someone had to. Because children were dying and no one else was willing to do anything about it. The chamber was silent. Eth stepped forward again. Representatives, I understand your concerns. The humans are powerful. What they have done is unprecedented. You look at them and feel fear. I understand that fear. I felt it myself when I first called for their help. He turned to face, then back to the assembly. But I have watched them for the past 3 cycles. I have seen how they fight, and more importantly, I have seen how they treat those they have saved. They did not conquer Minor. They liberated it. They did not demand payment for their services. They asked only that we accept their friendship. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The question before this council is not whether the humans are dangerous. They are. We have all seen proof of that. The question is whether we want them as our enemies or our friends. And what does that mean precisely? Asked Representative Al of the Silicon Mines. What are the humans asking for? Admiral answered. We're asking to end the quarantine, to be recognized as a legitimate member of the galactic community, to have the same rights and responsibilities as any other species. And in return, nothing. We're not asking for territory or tribute. We're not demanding special privileges. Clasped her hands behind her back. We're simply asking to be treated as equals, to trade and communicate and explore alongside everyone else. And if we refuse, Representative asked, if we decide that the risk of allowing free access to the galaxy is too great, was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. Then we return to our system and continue as before. We won't force ourselves on species that don't want us, but I would ask you to consider something first. She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. Right now, somewhere in this galaxy, there is another threat growing. Another species like the swarm gathering strength in the darkness. Maybe it's already attacked worlds in the outer regions. Maybe it's still building its forces, waiting for the right moment. But eventually, inevitably, it will come. Her eyes met N's. When that happens, you can face it alone. You can run like you've always run and hope that the threat passes you by, or you can call for help. And if you call, we will come. We will always come, because that's who we are. She took a step back, returning to her position with the human delegation. The choice is yours. The council debated for 7 hours. Elder watched from the observation gallery, her heart aching with anxiety. She had been invited to attend as a representative of the minor survivors, though she had no vote and no voice in the proceedings. Beside her, Sergeant Major sat in patient silence. The human had barely moved in hours, watching the debate with calm attention. "How can you be so calm?" asked. "Your entire future as a species hangs in the balance." "Not really," replied. "We'll be fine either way. We've survived 3 centuries of isolation. We can survive more if we have to." "But you want to be accepted. I can see it in your Admiral's eyes." "We want to help. That's different," shifted slightly. "Back on Earth, we have a saying, no good deed goes unpunished. We've done something that should be celebrated, ended a threat that terrorized the galaxy but half this council is more afraid of us now than they were of the swarm. Can you blame them? No, we are dangerous. There's no point pretending otherwise, but danger isn't the same as evil. A storm is dangerous. A predator is dangerous. Doesn't mean they're wrong to exist. Consider this. My people tell stories about Earth, tales meant to frighten children. Do not wake they say. Do not anger the monsters from the heavy world. We've heard similar things, smiled slightly. It's funny, actually. Humans tell scary stories about aliens, creatures from other worlds coming to conquer and destroy. And all along, the rest of the galaxy was telling scary stories about us. Your species is rather terrifying. I suppose we are. The smile faded. But we're also the ones who came when you called. Remember that, Elder. Whatever the council decides, remember that when your world was burning and no one else would help, we came. The vote was close. 31 species voted to maintain the quarantine. 29 voted to end it. The remainder abstained, unwilling to commit either way. The quarantine would continue. The humans would be sent back to their system, contained once more behind warning beacons and forbidden borders. Admiral received the news with no visible reaction. She simply nodded, thanked the council for their consideration, and began ordering her delegation to prepare for departure. But before they could leave, a voice rang out across the chamber. "I invoke the right of advocacy." Eth stood alone on the speaker's platform, his bioluminescence blazing with fierce light. The other representatives turned to stare at him in shock. "Ambassador, what are you doing?" High Counselor demanded. "I am invoking my species' right of advocacy, as granted in the original Compact Charter. The formally sponsor humanity for full membership in the Galactic Compact." The chamber erupted again. The right of advocacy was ancient, rarely used, a provision from the earliest days of the Compact that allowed any member species to champion a newcomer. It bypassed the normal voting procedures. It required only that the sponsoring species accept full responsibility for the behavior of their advocates. "You understand what this means?" and asked. "If humanity violates Compact law, they will be held accountable. Your species will bear the consequences of their actions." "I understand completely." Eth's voice rang with certainty. "The humans saved my people. They ask nothing in return. They have earned my trust, and through me, they have earned the trust of every who survived the swarm's attack. He turned to face the assembly. 3 cycles ago, I sent an SOS into the void. I begged for help, and only the answered. They crossed the galaxy to save strangers from a species that had rejected them. If that does not prove their character, nothing will. He looked at Admiral. I stand for humanity, the stand for humanity. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The chamber fell silent. High Counselor and studied the ambassador for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound that resonated with the weight of centuries. The right of advocacy has been invoked. According to compact law, the quarantine must be lifted. Humanity is hereby recognized as a provisional member of the Galactic Compact, under sponsorship. She banged her ceremonial staff. This session is adjourned. The representatives began to file out, many still murmuring in confusion or concern. But a small group remained behind, the delegation, the human officers, and a handful of other species who had voted for acceptance. Admiral approached Eve. Her expression was strange, something between gratitude and uncertainty. Ambassador, you didn't have to do that. You've put your entire species at risk for us. No, Eve replied. I have put my species at risk for what is right. There is a difference. He extended his hand, a human gesture he had learned specifically for this moment, looked at it for a moment, then took it. Her grip was strong and warm. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for coming when we called. Eve's bioluminescence shifted to gold, the expression of deep affection. Now, Admiral, let us discuss how we can help your people adjust to their new place in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, news of the Compact's decision spread across known space. The quarantine was ended. They were loose. Reactions varied. Some species welcomed humanity with open arms, eager to trade and learn from the newcomers. Others reinforced their borders and watched nervously for any sign of human aggression. A few sent diplomatic missions to Sol system, curious to see the nightmare world that had produced such fearsome creatures. Earth received them all graciously. The humans turned out to be surprisingly good hosts, welcoming, curious, eager to share their culture and learn about others. They were still dangerous, still capable of terrible violence, but they were also artists and scientists and dreamers. They built beautiful things and wrote touching poetry and laughed at jokes that made no sense to alien minds. The galaxy began to adjust. Elder traveled to Earth as part of the first cultural exchange. She walked through cities built by billions of humans, marveling at their energy and creativity. She visited the oceans that covered most of the planet, watched storms roll across the sky, felt the heavy gravity pressing down on her fragile body. And everywhere she went, she found humans who remembered what their soldiers had done on Minor. They asked about the survivors. They offered help in rebuilding. They expressed genuine sorrow for those who had been lost. On her last day on Earth, visited a memorial that had been built in a park in the capital city. It was a simple structure, a wall covered with the names of the Marines who had died in the liberation of her world. 237 names, etched in stone. Lieutenant found her there, standing before the wall in silence. He had been assigned as her escort during the cultural exchange, a role he seemed to take very seriously. They built this in 3 weeks, he said, joining her. As soon as the bodies were recovered and the families, humans have a thing about remembering our dead. It is beautiful, replied, simple and dignified. They volunteered, you know, every single one of them. When Admiral put out the call for the rescue mission, she had to turn away twice as many soldiers as she could take. Everyone wanted to help. Looked at the names. She could not pronounce most of them, unfamiliar sounds from unfamiliar languages, but she understood what they represented. Why, she asked. Why did they volunteer? They did not know us. They had no obligation to help. Was quiet for a moment. When I was a boy, my grandmother told me a story. She said that the measure of a person isn't what they do for themselves. It's what they do for strangers, for people who can't repay them, for people who might never even know their names. He touched one of the names on the wall, a soldier who had served in his unit, who had died defending a group of children during the evacuation. These people didn't die for glory or profit. They died because somewhere in the galaxy, children were in danger. That's all they needed to know. Felt her bioluminescence shift to deep gold. Gratitude and love, warmth and trust. Your grandmother was wise. She smiled. She would have liked you. Later that evening, composed a message to be sent back to the. It would be broadcast to every survivor of the minor attack, to every citizen who still feared the humans, to every child who had grown up hearing stories about the terrible. The message was simple. I have walked on the human. I have spoken with their people. I have seen their cities and their art and their monuments to the dead. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. We have nothing to fear from humanity. She paused, considering her next words carefully. They are not monsters. They are protectors. They are the shield that stands between innocence and evil. They answer the call when no one else will. They fight the battles that cannot be won, and somehow they win them anyway. Her voice softened. 3 cycles ago, our world burned. We screamed into the void, begging for help, and they came. They did not ask why. They did not ask for payment. They simply came and they saved us. She looked out the window at the strange, beautiful planet below. The galaxy feared humanity because of what they could destroy. But I have learned that true measure of a species is not what they can destroy. It is what they will protect. And the humans will protect anyone who asks for help. Anyone at all. She ended the message with a promise. They are our friends now, our allies, our family, and if the darkness ever comes again, we will face it together, the and the standing side by side. The message spread across the galaxy. Other species heard it and began to wonder. Perhaps they were not the monsters they had always feared. Perhaps there was another way to understand these strange, violent, compassionate creatures. And somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, in the places where terrible things waited and watched, a new kind of fear began to take root. Not the fear of being hunted or consumed, but the fear of something even worse. The fear of facing the humans. Because they had finally been let loose, they had proven what they could do, and they had made their intentions perfectly clear. They answered the call. They always would. And nothing in the galaxy would ever threaten the innocent again, without facing the full fury of the species from the heavy world. The monsters of the void had heard the message. They had delivered their reply. And the galaxy was finally, truly safe.